we do all this, and that's it for me. I'm okay. Now, please, ma, sir, when it comes to asthma treatment, not because I work with GSK, I'm a physician as well, I will tell you this. Oral medications are not the way to go. The major reason why some of our people are dying because of asthma is because we keep giving them oral medication. I'm not saying you, but even from the doctors in the hospital, I have seen colleagues give oral medication. If you go into the kinetics, pharmacodynamics of the oral medication, take for example salbutamol. How long do you think when the patient swallows it? How long do you think it will start acting? Inhaler medications go directly to the airway. Please. Please. Inhaler medications are the way to go. And hopefully, probably leave there with those clear messages. They deliver directly into the lungs. Where's the problem in somebody that have asthma? The airway. That's where the narrowing is. So whatever you're using, you want it to go only to that part. So you want it only in that area. Now, think about this as well. A single tablet of salbutamol comes in 2 milligrams or 4 milligrams. But the inhalation part for salbutamol comes in micrograms. They come in micrograms. So milligram, microgram is way lower. They act faster. Yes, I agree with you in terms of how the patient can use the inhaler. I mean, and it's not only here. It's not only here in developing countries. Even in developed countries, how many of you also have seen that video of Dr. House, where you've seen it? Where a patient was asked, "Oh, okay, my asthma is not controlled. Can you show me how you use your inhaler?" And she practically just took the inhaler and then spray one here, spray one here. The truth is, inhaler technique, it's a different ball game entirely. Please, at least my colleague doctors are not here. Even some doctors don't know how to use the inhaler. And so, it's just normal. What you don't know, you cannot recommend it for somebody that needs it. Sorry, pardon me, I'm a bit passionate about this, but let's go on. Next slide. Now, just move it don't move it down. Down. Yeah. Or is it up now? Up. Sorry. Please. Another thing that I want us to stop using. Asthma attack. The moment you tell the patient it's asthma attack, they think the person has a spiritual attack. So we've moved away from calling it asthma attack. Oh, acute asthma exacerbation. Okay, fine. No problem. No problem. No problem. No problem. I understand. No. Let me explain. And I think there's a better way. Fine, I understand you. I mean, I see patients as well, so I know what some of them see. I'm telling them that it's an asthma attack. You will not be moving forward. Oh, you were stable before, but this time around, it is unstable because of several things. Some things could have made it come unstable, like dust, it's trying to balance the science with the environment where we live in. It's not like your asthma attack is wrong, or we saying asthma attack is wrong. But the truth there is this: as part of the things that have gone, further to worsen acceptance of the disease is because we keep calling it this asthma attack. Please go on. Next slide. Just go on. Now, go on. I'm sure a lot of us know this. Okay. Just leave it here. So typically, when they come, please, because some of you are going to be the lifesaver for that patient that have asthma attack. If, for example, you think, oh, I've seen this patient has come to, you know the way it is, before they go straight to the hospital, it's a matter of life and death. I mean, how long does it take for someone to just stop breathing? If they've never used an inhaler before and think they have an attack, please tell them, use an inhaler and then go to the hospital. I know I've put here mild, moderate, severe, but let's just break it down as simple as it could be. Because you see that 1 puff, 2 puff of that salbutamol inhaler will go a long way to save the life of that person. Yeah, I mean, sometimes some of us probably might have nebulizers in our pharmacy. Well, that is still acceptable. You probably might want them to nebulize with salbutamol nebules. It will do the same thing, but it will take time for your tablet to work. Once they've had one, need to proceed to the hospital because they might need oxygen. Really, the acute phase of asthma, the right management for it is SOS, salbutamol, or short-acting beta agonists, oxygen, and then steroid, SOS, salbutamol, oxygen, and then steroid. Steroid could be in form of the oral, steroid could be in form of the injectable. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. Sir, please, sir, just follow me with this, because this is where we are. Inhaled, oral. I'm not going to go into all of it, but just think about this. Look at this and then just think about this. Onset of bronchodilation probably will take within 5 minutes, and then, oral could take between 15 minutes for salbutamol tablet. And what are we talking about? Time. Time. Right? Doses comes in micrograms. If you have ever taken salbutamol before, for any reason, or you've seen patients take it for any reason and they come back to you, one of the problems, one of the things that they complain about, especially when they take the oral form, is palpitation and tremor. Palpitations and tremor. It is serious for some people. You know the way it is for somebody to just feel my hands are shaking or my legs are shaking and I don't know what's causing it. Creates that panic. And for somebody that is asthmatic, they don't even need that panic, because that would even worsen their situation. Next slide. Good. Asthma control. Next slide. Next slide. For some of us that know David Beckham or MI, is the rapper. Those are typical examples of people that are asthmatic. But David Beckham had a very good career, right? Played for how many years? At least about 15, 20 years, right? If not more than. Don't worry, it's coming home, Abby. It's not coming home. Right. Now, the goal of asthma treatment is this. That's asthma control. You don't want them to have attack. The exacerbation, thank you. Thank you. I mean, yes. You don't want them to wake up at night because of the difficulty with breathing. You want them to use their rescue medications. That's their Ventolin inhalers. You'd want them to use it less because the more they use their rescue medication, that's the one that would, when they are having that exacerbation, the one that they need to use right now. Oh, thank you. Don't worry. All right. So you don't want them to use all this. That's what we are aiming for. Next slide. Next slide, Dan. Go on. Go on. Now, these are asthma controller medications. So the same way we prescribe drugs for somebody that is hypertensive or diabetics, these are asthma controller medications. They help reduce the inflammation and then the bronchoconstrictions. You have the inhaled glucocorticoids, you have the leukotriene receptors, then you have long-acting beta agonists, and then you have them in combination. Next slide. Okay, wait, can I have my training last? I have 5 minutes, but I would, don't worry. Next slide. So I'm going to give this to 3 people, but you must be able to demonstrate how to use the inhaler. It's a dummy device. Don't worry, just thank you. So who wants to show us how to use the inhalers? This my guy will. Don't worry, I'll ask you small. You can open it, don't worry. Who should I give? Okay. Yeah? It's an empty. Oh yeah, Nick, give me one more. Don't worry, I'll give you one. I'll give you one more. Just remind me, I have like 10. I just raised the hand first, but I'll have like 10. I'll give. Oh yeah. So that is right. So if you have it with you, don't worry. Just you can move my slide. Just move my slide. I'm almost done, really. Nika will do the rest. Next slide. It's okay. We've seen this before, right? At least we've seen this before now. Aha, Abba. So this is a different type of inhaler, right? This is the discus. So next slide. Next slide. Let me just show you how to use the discus. How many of us know the turbo inhaler? The turbo inhaler is what do you call it? Symbicort. Or is it Symbicort or Pumicort? Okay. Turbo inhaler, Symbicort, right? And then this is the discus. Go down. Go down. You can couple it like this, sir. Aha, good. Make sure that something is inside the dose counter, right? And then the person open it. Maybe you should move for up or down rather. Yeah, down. Go down. 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 Oh, okay. Up. Is it up or down? Up. Wait, the cursor, where is the cursor going? Okay, so move the cursor. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, don't worry. I actually want the other one. Go up. One more. Yeah. Okay, good. So now how to use this. And then this my guys and madam will demonstrate how to use the other one. Now, the patient would actually have this with them. And then the next thing they try to do is they check the dose. It's important to check the dose. Oh, this thing comes in 60. How many do I have left? If you have 0 left, there's no point using it. Now, there's the lever, there's the mouthpiece. Please, these things are not as difficult as if you want to use it. It's the right technique, like you said. One of the things I've discovered about a lot of patients is when they are supposed to inhale, that's when they exhale. And imagine something that's supposed to go in with inhalation, and then you are now, the person opens this like this, and then depress the lever down. See, what is inside here is covered by a tin foil, so that in the mouthpiece, when you look into the mouthpiece, it's already now open for the person to use as soon as the person depress the lever. And all what the person now needs to exactly wrap the mouth around here. Tell them to breathe out first, and then wrap the mouth around it, and then take a deep breath in. That is all. You know what they will usually complain to you about? I can't feel anything. That's the advantage of this. And unfortunately, that's the reason why a lot of people overuse it or don't know how to use it. Because unlike the pressurized meter dose inhaler, like the Ventolin or the Fixodine, or this is used. Right? This is the PMDI, the pressurized meter dose inhaler of this. And then this is the salbutamol. Now, as soon as they finish using, they close it back. If they need to take another dose, they start all over again. So, Oga, yeah, let's demonstrate that one now.
Yeah. And of course, this is cleaned. We are assuming that it's customized for just one user. Then put this mount around it. Hold it for some time.
Thank you. Don't worry, I'll round up. Bolaji, sorry. Aja, do you want to try? Thank you.
If it's a new one, or even if it's you prime it first before you use it. If it's a new one, or if you prime it like twice, just check the dose. So afterwards, you take a deep breath and breathe out. Then you wrap your hands around the mouth. Ensure that there's no air space at the side of the mouth. So once done, while breathing in, you press, bring it out. You don't open your mouth immediately. You have to like take it. Then again, the second dose twice. So that's
The only thing that you missed out, and the reason why this is a very good tool that you can use for your patients is this. It makes sound. This is a training. I'm not going through the step, but I just wanted to tell you. The reason why this makes sound is it helps train your patients if they are actually doing the right thing. Right? right? It should make that sound. That's when we are doing the demonstration of this. But like she said, just for me to wrap up and then call my colleague, okay, it's important to, first of all, check the expiry date of the inhaler, prime, and then of course, ask them to do a little bit of shaking. It's a pressurized meter dose inhaler, right? Then tell them to breathe out. You can move to the next slide. I think they have a diagram showing it. Go on. Yes. So that simplifies it. Remove the cap, shake the inhaler, breathe out gently. Place mouthpiece between the lips, and then tell them to take a deep breath in. At the time they are taking their deep breath in, that's also the time they are depressing this. Because a lot of times what happens is some of them will depress and then take a deep breath in, or they will breathe in and then depress. And they should hold their breath for 5 to 10 seconds or as long as they think they can. When they are done, then they can breathe out. If they need to repeat the second dose, they shouldn't just do like press it twice. No, they should do the process again. Please. I have some couple of trainers. I don't know the executive. I probably will leave some with the executive. And then if you see any GSK rep, grab them. Grab them. They probably might have one or two that they can spare. Let's ensure that our patients know how to use this thing. So that at the end of the day, we stop using brother, sister, family, friends, cousins, aunties to ask. Because really, it's a disease that we can manage. Thank you very much. Nika.
For the best business. Thank you. My slides, please. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adenike Ajibade, and I work with GSK. And I'm so excited that we have a lot of young minds here. And and the fact that some of you guys traveled down, it's a lot. Trust me, it's a lot. But it shows that you actually have something in mind for the profession. Yes, and we want to do something differently. So I'm going to be speaking to you from that angle. I'm not going to go the conventional style. Yes. How many of us have dispensed Ventolin before? Okay, almost everybody. How many people have dispensed prednisolone before? Almost everybody. Okay, so I was talking to a colleague of mine, and I was saying that back then in school, like I finished school in 2015. Back then in school, we actually did not know that there was something called inhaled corticosteroid, because where our lecturer's notes stopped was oral corticosteroid. So which actually means that the world has moved on and we're actually just catching up. And honestly, that is what is happening in Nigeria. So my day-to-day job, I speak with majorly specialists. By specialists, I mean consultants in family medicine, respiratory medicine, pediatricians, surgeons, urologists, and the like. And where we come in as pharmacists is to find out what is working now, not what worked time past. What exactly is working now and what are we supposed to do? And that is where we come in. Yes, I know that there are a lot of doctor pharmacy raised in most hospitals, there are community pharmacists doing their thing and all of that. But with where Nigeria is going right now, aside from those that are planning to japa maybe next year or something, if you want to stay here practicing this profession, it means you have to do something differently. It means you have to do something different from, yes, we have senior colleagues and all of that, But the truth is that wherever you are, there's something I believe that whatever you're practicing, whatever difference you can make wherever you are, it's going to follow you along your career path. Okay, enough of that. So right now we have about 200 million people in Nigeria. As of 2019, data showed us that we have about 11 people that are actually living with asthma. 11 million, I'm so sorry. Can I say? So now we have a body called GINA. They are the ones, it's called Global Initiative for Asthma. They're the ones in charge for, finding out what's going on with asthma patients. How can we take care of them better? And one thing we do not know here in Nigeria is that one exacerbation, I don't want to say attack, one exacerbation can actually take the person's life. The fact that somebody is wheezing right now, the person is actually at a 50-50 chance of life and death. And the truth is that what do we have to do at that time? Okay, now the body called Gina said that to manage asthma, we need to focus on two things. We want to make sure they don't have these exacerbations. And also we want to make sure that their symptoms are controlled. What we do majorly is to manage the exacerbation. Now, what causes the exacerbation? We all know, we've done pharmacology and clinical pharmacy and the like. Okay, asthma is a two-way problem. There's an ongoing inflammation and there's an exacerbation. What causes the exacerbation? It's the ongoing inflammation, which is it's going to be ongoing. That's why we say asthma management. It's ongoing. When you give just Ventolin, you are treating just the exacerbation. And then when you give oral corticosteroids, yes, but we know that they can only use this for 5 days, of which you have to taper down from 20 milligrams, then you have to go down, down, down till they're done. Now, what happens when they stop taking oral penicillin? Like I said, the inflammation is ongoing, and this is actually where GSK comes in now. What guides your choice in asthma medication? You've gone too fast, Victor. Gone too fast, no. So press the arrow cursor up, yes. Yeah, so this is where GSK comes in. We are actually the leaders in the respiratory portfolio. And like we are working on our legacy of trust. When you say augmenting, you know it's augmenting. Whenever you go anywhere. But now we are moving from, yes, we are working on antimicrobial resistance. We've gotten a hang of anti-infectives to a point. Now moving on to the respiratory portfolio, can we bring the same legacy? The same way you trust augmenting. Can you bring in that same trust when you're managing an asthma patient? That is where we are coming in. The same way you can vouch that when a patient comes into your pharmacy and they go with augmentin, as long as the diagnosis is right. Because if you use augmentin for a viral infection, it won't work. As long as the diagnosis is right. Can we take it a step further? Like I said, I'm glad that I saw a boss from Anambra. I mean, it's a long trip. So it means that you're actually interested in this profession. Can we take that same proactiveness into the respiratory portfolio? So now from GSK, we have Ventolin. We have 3 major products for asthma. We have the Ventolin, we have Flixotide, and we have Seretide. Like I said, asthma it's a two-way problem. You have to treat both the exacerbation and the inflammation. But you always need to remember that what causes the exacerbation is actually the inflammation. It's just like you taking paracetamol for like 2 weeks. Obviously, something else is wrong, but you keep taking paracetamol. That's what happens when you give just Ventolin. So now from asthma, we are saying that, of course, we are also following guidelines, and I will take us there. Your patient is supposed to be on 2 medications, a reliever medication and a controller medication. The reliever medication we have from GSK is Ventolin. Now we have 2 controller medications. We have Flixotide and Seretide. So it means a patient walks into your pharmacy to pick up a pack of Ventolin. Your job as a pharmacist is to ask, what controller medication are you using? Well, the patient might say, I've taken oral corticosteroid. And like I said, oral corticosteroid, I'm talking about prednisolone. Number 1, the duration, they cannot take it for a long time. Number 2, you want to consider the side effects, the oral systemic side effects that comes with taking oral medication, and you don't want that for your patients. Now, the advantage Flixotide and Seretide actually have over oral medications is that they go straight to the airway. And like you said, Fixotide is just 15 micrograms. Seretide is 125 micrograms as well. We have a lesser dose that is just 50 micrograms. That's for the Ebola. I'm going to show you pictures very soon. So that dose actually goes straight to the airway and actually acts on that inflammation that is going on there. Okay, we can move. Yes. So, and for time, yes, so I was going to show you, because for Seretide, we have the discus and the Ebola. I'm sure a lot of you are conversant with the discus. That's what is everywhere. But the Ebola is the other one that looks like Ventolin. They all have the same thing. And now, why did we come in with the Ebola? Quite a lot of patients have complained about the price of the discus. Yes, the discus from us comes at about 3,500 naira directly from us. Yeah, so of course, everybody has to make money because pharmacy is also a business, right? But then again, with that price, so we felt like, how can we also reach patients that might not be able to afford that? So we came with the Ebola, which is almost half the price of the discus. Now, the only difference is that for the discus, someone is taking 1 inhalation BD. For the Ebola, they have to take 2 puffs BD. So 2 puffs of the Ebola is equal to 1 inhalation for the discus. Now, let me tell you something beautiful about Flixotide. For Flixotide, a child from age 1 can actually use Flixotide. I think you should clap for us now. Thank you. Because we realize that there are a lot of children that actually live with asthma too. Adults can also use Flixotide. So adults with mild to moderate asthma can actually be placed on Flixotide. Once it's going to mild persistence or moderate persistence, you can now step up to Seretide, which also means that if you have a patient that has been on Seretide for about 3 to 6 months and they've not had more than 2 or 3 exacerbations, by exacerbations I mean attack, you can actually step them down either to the lesser dose of Seretide or to the lesser dose of Flixotide. The goal is to make sure that they have the minimum level of steroid as much as possible. But remember, it goes to the airway. And when it goes straight to the airway, only less than 1% actually gets to the blood, other than you pumping prednisolone into the patient. Then the patient later coming out with edema and the like. Now, we did some studies, but I would not bother you with that. We compared Flixotide to budesonide. And most people will now ask, because when you engage most healthcare professionals, they now ask, okay, the fact that this person is taking steroid every day, won't it affect the growth? Because we know that too much of steroid, of course, has its own side effect. But then compared to budesonide, we've seen that it does not really have an effect on the growth velocity of a child or an adult. So you don't really need to worry about that. Also, the peak expiratory flow rate, that's how forceful they can actually breathe out, is actually way much better than budesonide. We also compare this with our famous leukotriene receptor antagonist, yes. And we've seen that usually some asthma patients can not actually sleep at night. And we've seen that it actually gives you 50% much more better outcome compared to those on leukotriene receptor antagonists as well. Then we also compared Seretide with formoterol and budesonide combination. I think that's Symbicort, yes. And we've seen that over time, you get better results for the patients when they use Seretide other than using Symbicort. Finally, okay. So finally, we're seeing that in majority, 4 out of 5 patients that are actually on Seretide actually do better than any other medication that you actually place them. So that being said, I was going to take us to the guidelines. Please move. Yes. So you can just check it up later on GINA guidelines. Where we come in is actually step 2 and step 3 on the GINA guidelines. So there are different steps based on how frequent the exacerbations are for your patients. So that is going to tell you if the patient should be on Flixotide or the patient should actually be on Seretide. All right, I'm almost done. So finally, the focus of this is having a control-directed care. Control-directed, which actually means that I've gone way past this, Victor. Move up. move. No. I'm on page 18. Thank you. All right. So the focus is that when an asthma patient walks into your pharmacy and they're actually living with just Ventolin, your job as a pharmacist is to ask, what controller medication are you using? Because you cannot just treat headache without treating malaria. We know that we don't want to say what might happen. And that is actually, we are losing a lot of patients. You need to take a walk into an emergency room, maybe one time. We are actually losing patients from exacerbations, and these things can actually be controlled. So that being said, thank you. That being said, so this is talking about where it comes in. Ventolin is for the exacerbations. Yes, so because it's acute, it's short-acting beta-2 agonist, salbutamol. So it means once the person is gasping for air, you don't want to give Flixotide or Seretide, please. The person is gasping right now, Ventolin is what you pump. Either enables all this. Now, afterwards, how do we prevent the patient from coming back gasping for air? Now, usually what we don't know is that if a patient's asthma is actually controlled, the person will use a pack of Ventolin for a whole year. But you have people using a pack in a month or even in 2 weeks. So it shows that their asthma is actually very terrible. So now Flixotide comes in for mild to moderate. We have an ACT card. When you're done, we have a stand outside. I will give you guys the ACT card where you can actually ask questions to be able to know if it's mild, persistent, or moderate persistent, to know where to group these patients, to know if their asthma is controlled or not. So for mild to moderate persistent asthma, you want to give Flixotide, and children from age 1 can actually use it. It's given 2 pulse BD. For Seretide, the discus is given 1 inhalation BD. That's for the higher dose and the lower dose. But we don't have the lower dose of the discus in Nigeria. But for the Evo-Ala, we have both the higher dose and the lower dose. And of course, when we are talking about cost effectiveness, you might also want to consider the Evo-Ala for patients that might not be able to afford the discus. So the goal is these things are affordable. If you want the discus, it's available. If you want the Evo-Ala, it's available. And if it's Flixotide mild to moderate persistent, it's also available. But a patient should not walk out of your pharmacy with just Ventolin alone. It should be Ventolin and Flixotide, or Ventolin and Seretide. Thank you.
Sorry, we'll take questions after this session. I won't take so much time. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ogechi. I work with GSK. A lot has been said concerning asthma, Seretide, Ventolin, Flixotide. I'm going to look at something slightly different. I'm going to be looking at allergic rhinitis. It's a common occurrence in our midst. I don't know if by chance you might have colleagues or family members or friends that you notice they're constantly sneezing. It seems as if they have a cold all year round. Or you see some people, they just have watery eyes. They'll tell you they don't have bad eyesight, but their eyes are always teary. For some others, they have itchy eyes. Now, that condition is what we call allergic rhinitis. And from GSK, we have medications that are dedicated to handling it. Now, allergic rhinitis can be in 2 forms. It can either be perennial or it can be seasonal. When we say perennial allergic rhinitis, we're talking about those cases of allergic rhinitis where all year round, 24/7, the symptoms are there. They don't seem to go away. But for seasonal allergic rhinitis, you find out that maybe the person has the symptoms right now, and maybe after like 2 days, they're resolved. So allergic rhinitis are usually grouped into either perennial or seasonal allergic rhinitis. The first slide, please. So from GSK, we have Zizal. To remember this, just remember XYZ of allergic rhinitis. Victor, this first slide. The first slide. Yes. So to remember this, like I said, you just remember XYZ of allergic rhinitis, and you will remember the word Zizal. So Zizal is used in cases of allergic rhinitis over most of the other medications that are available. Now, what makes Zizal different? What makes it distinct? What makes it high up on the table. Zysal is fast. Now, when a patient with allergic rhinitis walks up to a pharmacist, the first thing on the patient's mind is relief. It doesn't want to think of any other thing. The first thing on his mind is relief. And then getting that relief fast is also paramount. Now, Zysal gives you that fast relief. What does it do? It starts to act within 60 minutes. Now, it's an oral medication, yes, but it starts to work within 60 minutes. So if you have somebody that comes into the pharmacy and it's giving Zysal, and you tell the person to maybe take a chair or something and sit down there, he could still be in the pharmacy, and you would be surprised to see physically that that patient will feel better. So Zysal has that advantage of being fast. The second advantage of Zysal is its potency. Move. Move. So when we talk about potency, we're talking about receptor occupancy. Now, for a drug to be potent, it's the number of the drug that is available to act on the receptor, basic. If a drug is highly protein bound, we know that not much of the free drug will be available to bind on the receptor. Now, for Zysal, at 4 hours, when this study was carried out, we found out that 90% of the drug was found to bind to the H1 receptor. That's large. That's a huge amount. 90% of the drug that was taken in. And even after 24 hours, we still had up to 57% of the drug on the receptors. This singular activity gives Zysal its potency. And that's one of the reasons why Zysal is highly potent. Next slide, please. Then the other advantage of Zysal is in terms of the duration of action. Now, we do not want to give a drug that under 1 hour, under 2 hours, the patient will start feeling all the symptoms all over again. We want to give something that the patient can go out and behave as if he or she never had an allergy symptom in the first place. Now, Zysal is able to give this efficacy consistently for 24 hours. So if a patient takes Zysal medication, for example, in the morning, after food or after breakfast or getting ready for work, the patient is able to go out and forget that he or she ever has an allergy reaction. Because it will work in 24 hours, there would still be that effect and that symptom relief associated with Zysal. So this study was conducted to compare Zysal with some of our common anti-allergens. In this case, desloratadine. It's from the loratadine family. And in this study, it was found out that, like I said earlier, after 24 hours, there was better alleviation of the nasal obstruction that's usually associated with allergic reactions. In the next study that was carried out, it was a study between Zysal and fexofenadine. And just as we said earlier on, it was more potent, and there was the improvement in baseline after 24 hours was seen to be higher than the use of fexofenadine. Okay, so I've been speaking about Zysal. I want you guys to have a pictorial view of what this Zysal looks like. This is Zysal from GSK. We have the tablets, that's the 5 milligram tablets, and then we have the Zysal oral drops. Now, the oral drops are for children from 2 years to 6 years. We know what it feels like for a child of 3, for example, that attends pre-nursery, and for one reason or the other, because of allergy reactions, the child has to be off school. We know what it means for the caregivers, we know what it means for the child, and we know what it means generally in terms of the quality of life of everyone associated with that child. That is the reason why we have Zizal oral drops. Most of the medications you find in the market are usually restricted to adults, or there's this caveat of we can't guarantee its use in children. So we are presenting you with something that is safe in children. We are sure of it. You are certain that it will act fast. You are certain that it will be potent, and you are certain that it will act for a long duration of time. Now, how is Zizal taken in conclusion? For the oral drop, the oral drop comes already calibrated. So when you see it, simply open the cork, put it up, and you turn it upside down under a with a spoon underneath, and it drops into the spoon. Now you need 5 drops. So you just put it underneath and you turn it, and it drops 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you administer it to the child. So for caregivers and parents that might come to the pharmacy and you decide to recommend Zizal drops to them, or for those that come requesting for Zizal drop, it is very important that we give them this message when they are leaving, because we have found out that some parents take it and they get home and they do not understand how the Zizal drop works, because it doesn't work like your regular syrups. So they just turn it upside down and let the drops drop on the spoon. 5 drops in the morning, 5 drops at night. So for the children, for Zizal oral drops, you take it twice a day, morning and night. Now for adults from 6 years and above, you need just 1 tablet of Zizal. Remember, I said it is highly potent, and then it also has a long duration of action. So because of that, it works 24 hours. All you have to do is just take 1 tablet, and it works for the entire 24 hours. Now, some people may not get Zizal tablets. In that case, as adults or from 6 years and above, in that case, you're able to take the oral drops. It's just that this time around, you would need 20 drops for you to get your 5 milligram that is required for the age. So you will take 20 drops just once a day. I hear a lot of murmuring. Okay, so thank you for your time. I wanted to speak in conclusion about GSK's site. I know we have fed you with a lot of information today, and the truth about it is that GSK is committed to giving healthcare professionals the needed scientific knowledge that you need. Knowledge is power. The truth is, a patient cannot be seated with you and know more about a disease condition than you, who seems to be the healthcare professional. It's not balanced that way. So we derive joy in giving healthcare professionals the needed knowledge that they would use in their practice. Because of this, we have a site. We call it GSK Pro site. Every information that you would need regarding GSK brands and the disease areas that we have brands on, everything is on that site. Most of the things we have spoken today, you can check that site and you would get it at your own convenience. You can also do other things on the site. For example, you can call to, you can choose to speak with a rep. It's possible that you are in a fix and you need information regarding something urgently. We have a chat box on the site where you can send that request to speak with a rep, and somebody will get back to you. Now, this site is, are you guys ready to take it down? Are you ready to take it down? I don't see people with their pens or their phones. Okay, you are ready. www.gskpro.ng. Now, to access this site, like I said, it's for health. GSK Pro, P-R-O, professionals. gskpro.ng, Nigeria. Yes, .com. Like I said, the site is meant for healthcare professionals. So it's not an open site. So because of that, you'll be required to register. When you open the site, you'll be required to register. There are two ways to register on the site. You either use an access ID. For you to have an access ID, you must have met a GSK rep one-on-one, and we have your data captured. However, if you have not met a GSK rep one-on-one, you can use the second method to register on this site. The second method just requires you to fill in your details, including your email address and all of that. And you'll be registered on the site and you will get access to the wealth of knowledge on allergy, on anti-infectives, on asthma, on epilepsy, and other disease areas. So thank you for your time. Do we have questions here? Okay. Can we go back to that last slide, please, Victor? If you notice, I said 5 drops for children. Now, each of those drops, at the end of the day, you get 1.25 milligrams of that 5 drops. That's the reason why children are supposed to take it twice a day. We have to drop the quantity in terms of dosage. For pharmacists, you cannot give a child and an adult the same dosage. Are we clear? No. Dosage does not affect the half-life. 12 hours for children because of the fact that we have to drop the quantity. We could have easily said 10 drops daily. But Zyza, like I said, is highly potent. Remember, it has 90% receptor affinity. Whatever it is you are giving, you know it is going, majority of it is going to the receptor. We do not want to overdose the child. So it is safer to give 5 drops morning and 5 drops night.
Guys, I'm not presenting, don't worry. I just wanted to tell each and every one of you, please, when you're done leaving here, just stop by at the GSK desk. There's a copy of a guide to managing asthma for pharmacists. It's majorly a summary of what we've talked about, and I can assure you, you will find it beneficial. How to use the inhaler is there and all that. So they have a pack for you from the GSK desk, so you can stop by, pick it up, and then please, let's do this. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, GSK, for that workshop on treatment of asthma and allergic rhinitis.
All right, please, a round of applause for them once more. Okay, a round of applause for them once more. I know we are tired, but
don't let's get tired. Just give them a round of applause.
Okay, so right about now, we're going to start our plenary section. We have our panelists, seasoned panelists that would be calling up stage now, and of course, our able moderator. So please join me. I'm going to be calling their names really fast because there's no time. So the moderator for the plenary session is Pharmacist Ebere Okoli Angela. Please, a round of applause for her. She makes her way to the stage. Thank you very much. Also joining us as one of our panelists is Pharmacist Abdullah Fiz Ayodele. He will share with us his journey as a supply chain person, and he works as a consultant with UNICEF. Please, a round of applause for him. Pharmacist Abdulafiz Ayodele is here. Please kindly take your place on stage. Okay, so one of our panelists will be joining us virtually. That's the person of Pharmacist Suleiman Sule will join us virtually. Yeah, the CEO of Shelf Life will join us virtually.
And then finally, we have Pharmacist Mustafa Umar, who is representing Hajia Aisha Ishaya Kutuko, the Executive Secretary, Kaduna State Health and Drug Management Agency.
Please, a round of applause for these people. We have seasoned speakers, panelists, and moderators with us.
So we have 30 minutes for this session. Pharmacist Ebeli, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion for this second annual conference of PSN-YPG. I hope you can all hear me. My name has already been mentioned. I'm Okolebere Angela. So let's take 1 minute and meet our panelists. Welcome, sir. Can you please tell us your name and what you do?
My name's Pharmacist Mustafa Umar. I work with Kaduna State Health Supplies Management Agency. I work as a warehouse and distribution manager in the agency. Right now, I'm representing the Executive Secretary of the agency. Thank you.
Welcome, sir. Sir, can we meet you, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pharmacist Abdulafiz Mustafa. I work with UNICEF as a National Immunization Supply Chain Consultant. I work to help to deploy COVID-19 vaccines across the country. So I work here at the Abuja Country Office to support the processes across the 36 states and FCT. Thank you.
Okay, nice. I see I have capable hands for this topic. So let's do justice to it. So first of all, you know, this audience is made mostly of young pharmacists. So supply chain is kind of, should I say strange or a very not common profession in this country. So can you break down supply chain in a layman's definition for us? I'll start with you, sir.
Okay. Just as the word said, supply chain. You have supplies and you have chain. So anything that is chain, it means you need one step, then you move to the next step, meaning it is connected. In supply chain, you have the upper stream and then the lower stream, as in. So the upper stream deals mainly with raw material sourcing, manufacturing, and then the lower stream deals mostly with customers and then where the product is. So as far as supply chain is concerned, it is simply the flow of commodities, materials, anything you think of, from the upstream down to the downstream, then to the consumer. So all activities that goes through this channel is what we call supply chain. So you need the manufacturers to manufacture products. Then you need logistic people that will move the product from point A to point B. Then you need the consumers that will also consume the product. So in a simple layman, it's just the flow of products from the upstream, which I said, the manufacturers, down to the downstream, which is the final consumer, which in between you have logistic activities that have to do with warehousing, transportation, sourcing, and other things. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm coming to you, sir. Do young pharmacists or pharmacists in general, do you think they have a place in supply chain and logistics as a profession?
Thank you very much for that. Well, pharmacy is actually a multi-technical degree. So it offers us opportunity to engage in many career paths. So the opportunity is there for anyone interested. So for anything that has to do with supply chain of pharmaceuticals, the only people that are capable and that have the certification to conduct the business is actually pharmacists. So it's not a question of is there opening. The question is, are we actually interested in following the line? Are we interested in following supply chain as a career path? So I understand the fact that supply chain is actually a new career. For someone like me, I also started my career like 3 years ago in supply chain. So supply chain is, there are actually not many people that I've seen having experience of 30 years, 20 years that you can follow. But certainly there are actually people who have moved either from the hospital pharmacy into the supply chain career. So there's actually opportunity. Once you have the right certifications, you have the right experience, and definitely there are a lot of openings that is available for young pharmacists that we can tap into. Thank you.
Okay, so still on you, sir. That's a yes. And you mentioned that there are a lot of opportunities. So can you tell us some of these opportunities?
Okay, so supply chain is also like, telling anybody that, okay, I like to engage in sporting activities. So, but you need to understand a question. What type of sporting activities do you want to engage in? So just like supply chain, you also want to, make people understand that, okay, this is the area I'm going to go into. So supply chain, for me, take for instance, for myself now, I'm engaged in the immunization supply chain. That is, I work with vaccines. I deal with anything that has to do with movement, coaching, logistics. So meaning that, our vaccines, they have to be kept at a certain temperature. So definitely, there are some processes, there are some, experiences, that you need that might not be applicable for someone that is moving into product logistics. So if you are probably doing, malaria medications, logistics, you won't have to monitor what we call the coaching. In coaching, there are a lot of, knowledge, a lot of skills that you need to also develop in that area. So supply chain is also wide. So in as much as possible, I know they can actually, move in between, different careers. You don't have to fix yourself as a supply chain expert in one area, of course. So you need to make yourself versatile. So like I said, you have to pick a point in supply chain. And like my co-speaker has already mentioned, what part of the supply chain do you want to work in? There are many actors in supply chain. So you have to talk about the product, even the people involved in manufacturing, they're also part of the supply chain, down to the consumers. If you interface with the consumers, as a pharmacist, you're also in the supply chain. So you're working in a community pharmacy, you're interfacing because you are a part of the chain that carries the drug from the manufacturer. Even the person that is designing the drug, if you are designing the drug, supply chain has been integrated such that if you're going to make your products easy to carry for a consumer to make it up, you have to infuse design into it. So everyone is part of the supply chain, and so they have to pick what area that you have to work in. So many people feel supply chain is not when you just work in a warehouse alone. So, but no, even people that are working in policy making, so they're also part of supply chain. So you just have to pick a point that you want to work with, and you build your career there.
Okay, that's a nice one. I was going to ask you how they can leverage on these opportunities, but you already answered it by developing skills that are required for the job, right? Okay, I'm meant to understand that one of our panelists is joining us online. So wherever you are, sir, hi, how are you doing? Please leave comments for any of the questions you can, or give us contributions, and we'll be happy to share on any channel, either via emails or WhatsApp, for people to learn. So I have a very interesting question here. How do you rate the level of medicine access in Nigeria in particular? We can also look at Africa, but let's focus on Nigeria for now.
Well, actually, I would rate medicine access. Why? The Nigerian supply chain, as far as medicine is concerned, is a porous one. The pipe has a lot of holes. So I'm doing my supply chain, and one of the my dissertation is on medicine availability, that is stock out, and how to mitigate that issue. So it will be interesting to know that from the sample size I've got, virtually 100% of all my respondents agree that there is stock available. There is stock out in their health facilities. Then why? Is it that the upstream, as I said, the manufacturers are not manufacturing the product? Or is it that there is issue of transportation, of movement of the products from the upstream down through the pipeline to the final consumer in the health facilities? No, actually, no. The problem is there are a lot of wastages. There are numbers of irregularity in distribution. We always have, let me say, third parties. Actually, it's supposed to be from manufacturers, last mile delivery, as we said, directly to the consumers. But you realize that all the distributors we have are part of the problem. They take advantage of seasons, advantage of demands, and then hold products. And that actually is the problem. So when you need a product, you realize that the product is not available, but it's available in a short note. The pipeline is filled up of commodities, but there are a lot of irregularities in the distribution.
I think we saw an example of that during the EXAS process of all our COVID-19 palliatives, right? Okay, so sir, to you, this problem that have, this shortage in the chain of supplies, what problems do you think it has caused the country?
Okay, thank you very much. Wherever there is a problem in the supply chain, and what happens is most of us. So for all the pharmacists, we are chemicals. So the people that suffer most from our end are actually the patients. So you as a pharmacist, you are supposed to drop a medication plan for a patient, and you realize that you can order from the store, and we found out that ICP medication was so then it means that they just have to. So one of the major key parts that we understand is so I don't want to go to the profit side now. So is that our health outcomes. So the patient next time, and you have to come back to come and get the drug somewhere else. So it's kind of and they get that sort of minutes. And moving on to the chain again, also that what is the cost of that? So whenever you supply chain, you have to think about the cost aspects of it. So the cost aspect of that is from the cost aspects is the manufacturer. They also have so if there are shortages in supply chain, they also have quite a cost. So if they stock out for now, it means that they probably lost on the percentage of revenue. And you know that for any manufacturer, once they start the production line, so the production line, whether it's 1,000, 1 million. So what happens is that production already. So you don't get to sell this product. Many reps can actually testify to the fact that many times they have to probably rush on stock, probably they are expiring months or 2 months to start rushing and start pushing. So these are some of the issues that we challenges. And sometimes they are not in the fortunate enough to actually so certainly supply chain affects all the actors. And like I said, the actors of the manufacturers, the distributors, the wholesalers. The most important thing is the customers. So that comes to us. So you are the caregiver and the manufacturers. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the topic of the day. There's the partnership between corporate services and two companies helping people access to this. Those are our community. Can or cannot corporate services partner with these two companies to improve your life?
They can, and that partnership actually starts. But the question is, what kind of partnership? What kind of relationship? But they said the goal or the actual aim of supply management is satisfying the customer. So to our mind, satisfying the patients or our clients. So actually, we are a there's partnership between the industrial banks and the partnership is one, and long-term partnership also. It will help both the industrial banks and also the banks. And at the end, the person will be well satisfied with the customer. So I said, which type of partnership? Mostly, what is going on right now is mostly transactional. I need products, I go to the supplier, or I just want to bring the products and it's there. So if it is that, it is accessibility or availability of it, it's not going to be well managed or but if there is a good partnership for a long time one, which is built based on trust, built based on information sharing, built based on risk sharing, built based on visibility. I think community. I know right now in most of the drugstore, African Resource Center is trying to bring companies like this, where there's going to be partnership between drug pharmaceutical product manufacturers and then the 6 drug management agencies. And I know one of the 6 already into that. So what will happen is they bring in commodities to you, and they also need to, like outsourcing, sorry. If you want to achieve a lot and then you compete in the market, there are certain activities that you don't use for this. You just outsource to some people. Why you just focus on your core markets? Like community pharmacies, their core market is to make sure their patient got what he needs, and also provide the pharmaceutical care. So they can give the aspect of logistics of commodities to the industrial pharmacists, while the industrial pharmacy will enjoy availability of commodities as the community pharmacy sell the products. They have so they make a lot of profits. I know the other colleague that's supposed to join. Yeah, it's my colleague, and I know he has a company. Sorry, a business which is kind of partnership where they look into the one that manage your inventory. You don't need to start coming here and look at it. Oh, I have a small thing. I have no. The industry will just take care of that by you providing them information. So if you close your business today, you send them information that's only have 5 or 7 help. So and you check what is your first stop that you always have in the pharmacy. And at the end, before you do it, the next morning, the van will just come into the paracetamol. So you don't need to start going to the market. You don't need to start looking for any like to bring product. So in a nutshell, the partnership, if I know it will help industrial pharmacies having more profit, and then it will help the community pharmacy also engaging on their own core activities. And at the end of the day,
organizations are engaging with community pharmacists
give
now.
me other ways.
So we know, yes. So now we have some companies, startups. So I don't know if I'm allowed to mention name. So we now have
they'll pay for adverts,
etc.
Okay.
So these are actually companies managed by pharmacists. So what they do is what we call vendor managed inventory. So, they just come in, they help you to, manage your stock and ensure that, there's stock availability at all times. But what happens in the sense is that it also goes back to the manufacturers. I know the topic is talking about the manufacturers and, so what happens to the manufacturer? Fine, we know what happens to the community pharmacies. Yeah, there's no stock out, there's always medicine availability, and also the risk, is also shared between you and the manufacturer. So, those are the kind of partnerships, that, happens. And, for any supply chain, like I said earlier, it has to be integrated. Integrated in the sense that, all the actors need to communicate. So like he has pointed out the other time, so many times you have reps, they come to the community pharmacy, they exchange products with you. You as a community pharmacy, what do? You send funds. So what aspect is missing is the information. So the information sharing is not as solid as, you will have expected in any streamlined, supply chain. So information sharing has to do with probably information on, okay, what is our, order forecasting? I have to forecast, okay, this is based on our consumption period in the last few months. This is how many we are going to also use in the next few months. So these are the kind of information that a manufacturer will need. So because for any manufacturer, what happens is that, they enjoy from economies of scale. Economies of scale is talking about that if I can produce 1 million tablets, that is better for me than producing 100,000. Because the manufacturing processes involved is the same. Whether you're producing 1,000 or 100 is the same thing. So I enjoy from economies of scale because the cost of production is going to reduce. So that is what happens when there is partnership, because from the partnership, from you as a manufacturer, you have information that, okay, this is a seasonal period. Now we're in the rainy season. We are going to have high cases of flu, high cases of malaria. So you can set your production machine. Okay, yes, we need to produce more of this product. Then we need to order products. So these are the kind of you're talking about this type of partnerships. But I'm trying to delve into what happens, within the manufacturer and the community pharmacy. So the partnership also cannot happen without an intermediary, like you mentioned. So for development partners, there are development partners that does that. So, and there are also some private organizations, like I has mentioned, Africa Resource Center. I know they've done that with Yobe State. So they have a partnership. They are trying to bring manufacturers, to engage directly with government agencies, government procurement agencies. So what happens is that for me as the owner, the CEO of a company, that is what I want to hear. Because I know that, okay, whatever I produce, there's a ready market for it. There's a ready buyer, there's ready funds. And these are the procurement agencies. They are going to make funds for it available. So that also needs to be translated to community pharmacy. I don't think there is actually an intermediary between community pharmacy and the industry that is doing such for now. I'm not aware. So, but it's only going to be a good thing if we can have that. Thank you.
I'm still with you. In non-governmental organizations, like you are in the international level, yes? So I know that they deal with information, funds, products, and all. In what ways have you guys been able to work with pharmaceutical companies in specifically on our topic, medicine access?
Thank you very much. So for medicine access, I can't talk specifically about what we do in my organization, but for developmental organizations, what we do generally for procurement, there are some development organizations that do procurements for countries. So take for instance now, we all know what we call COVAX. So COVAX is like COVAX facility. Take for instance, is a coalition of international bodies. So what they do is that they guaranteed manufacturers that there's going to be funds available if you produce so and so number of vaccines for us. So that is why you can find out that Nigeria could also get access to some quantity of vaccines. And it's because of the fact that there's a platform that assures the manufacturer that if you produce 100 million doses of vaccine, I am going to buy it and I'm going to distribute it. So then they are going to be the one to communicate directly with countries regarding the funds. So what concerns the manufacturer is that I have my money, I can set my production in line, because like I said earlier, before you can produce anything, it pays you as a manufacturer to produce on a large scale. So now we have faster transportation networks. So that is not a barrier now. In just a day, your vaccines from anywhere in the world can reach any part of the world. So now the bone of contention is that who is going to buy these vaccines? So now development partners, what they do is that, like I said, through their organizations, through their country offices, they come together, they pool the funds together, and they make this procurement at once. And when they make this procurement, then you can be assured that the cost is going to be very much reduced than comparing for a country to go directly to like Pfizer now and say, okay, I want to buy this total number of vaccine. So if you say you want to buy like 10 million doses of vaccine, it's not enough for them. So, but when you come and you say as a whole, and say we are buying 2 billion doses of vaccine, that is what they want to hear, and that is what will move the company's profits forward. Thank you.
I have one question for each of the panelists. I hope we're enjoying the session. Okay, so, sir, I know that the last part of our topic says the role technology plays in supply chain. So we know that the industries have moved from like companies, the distribution competitive market has moved from between companies to supply chain versus supply chain. So what role do you think technology has played in this?
Actually, technology is one of one of the aspects that is disrupting the entire supply chain. And in fact, the disruption is a positive one in that we all have been talking about information sharing and data management. And without information, without data within the supply chain, then you can't get anything. So with information technology, information sharing has become very easy. Yeah, from where I am, I can directly send information to any partner. Let's say, as we are discussing now, any industry, that this is what I need and these are the data I have. And that will basically help also the industries themselves to start preparing what you need. Because if you have information before you know what you need to manufacture, and there's not going to be wastages within the supply chain. So, but without information technology, so the sharing of information, the movement of data from the upstream to the downstream is going to be very hard, and that is also going to infringe availability of medicine, actually.
Thank you very much. So, sir, the final question. The world is tending to Industry 4.0, where everything is digitalized to the higher level. So we are, like you said, we are into destructive innovation. Do you think Nigeria is ready? And in what ways? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So, like I've said earlier on, regarding the fact that we have companies now, technological companies, startups that are coming up with different solutions for supply chain issues. So what we need to be talking about is that, is there a market for it? So it's not about the fact that is Nigeria ready technological wise, it's about that is there market, and there is market. There are over 200 million people. So the market is there. So when there's market, you can be rest assured that the technology will definitely catch up with it. So it can be slow at first, but then it will definitely come. So we're talking about recently now, we're talking about even application of blockchain technology. I know of a young pharmacist that has patented something on that as related to supply chain. So they are using blockchain technology to do track and trace. You are using barcoding, using the global trade item number, global locator indication number. So these are some of the things that allows you to, from the point of manufacturer, you can pinpoint that this is where your drug is at every point in time. There's radio frequency, identification system. So these are all type of application technologies, but you just have to look at it from another perspective that, how does it affect all the processes and activities in the supply chain? So, we are talking about warehousing. There are a lot of technologies in that, the automated storage and retrieval systems. We're talking about the automated guided vehicles, the robots, etc. So we're talking about transportation technology. Like we said, now people are using drones. I know now there's a company called Zipline coming to Kaduna now to distribute, health products. So they're already in Rwanda, they're distributing blood products. These are applications of technology, and these companies are actually moving to Nigeria. So because they know the market is there. So Nigeria is ever ready for any type of innovation you can ever think of. So probably we as a pharmacist, we need to probably ask ourselves a question, okay, what can I do to improve any processes that I find myself in? You've identified a gap, what knowledge you have. You don't need to learn how to probably code or do something, but you can actually start up, something, bring in people that have the skills, and form, an organization that can tackle some of these issues. So because the market is there for you, and there are definitely challenges. So we just have to dissect the system and find a solution.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. And to you, wonderful young pharmacists, thank you so much for paying attention. This is the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that plenary session. Thank you, Pharmacist Ibiri, our moderator. And thank you, our panelists.
Young pharmacists. I know that many of us are already tired, but we are tough people. So we must push to the very end. So right about now, I'm sure we've seen the announcement on the group about the breakout session. The breakout session is going to be like this. We have two breakout sessions, one on policy formulation and advocacy, and then another on opportunities for pharmacists, vaccination services, opportunities for pharmacists. So you can identify with whichever one you want to do and move to the venue for that. Okay, so the one for policy formulation and advocacy is holding here in this hall. So if you want to sit in for that breakout session, please remain here. But for the vaccination services, the one for vaccination services, please, the next hall. Let's kindly move to the next hall immediately for those that want to do. So the facilitators.
So our facilitators for this breakout session, we have pharmacist Tolu Ogunlesi, who is the special advisor on digital and new media to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We also have pharmacist Tosin Adeyemi, a clinical pharmacist, lecturer at the University of Lagos, and a former editor-in-chief of PSN. So let's break out if you are for policy and advocacy, you are staying here, and vaccination, move to the other hall. Please, let's be snappy with that.
My body, now your own.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Please, can we move forward for the policy and advocacy workshop? Please, can we move forward? Please, if you're behind, please, can you just move forward? Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Let's just move forward. Please, if you're behind the hall, can you move forward for the policy and advocacy workshop? All right, thank you, everyone. Please, if you're here to move forward, please indulge us and move forward, please. Thank you very much. We will not be taking so much of your time this evening, so we'll be going into business. My name is Jongbo Olukola. I'm the coordinator for the Professional Development Committee, YG National. And like I said, this is the policy and advocacy workshop for this conference. I do hope you enjoy it as we, go on, and I hope you find it educative as well. So we're going to be having 2 sessions. This workshop is going to be broken into 2 sessions. We'll be having someone talk to us about policy and advocacy, and he'll be sharing some of his experiences with us on how policies have been formulated, how they have been implemented, and all that. And after that, we're going to be having a simulation class where you'll be shared into groups and you'll be tasked with coming up with policies around certain topics that you'll be informed about as we move on. So let's be settled, let's listen, and let's also participate when the time comes. So like I said, the first session will be starting now, and I'll be bringing up our speaker in the person of Tolu Ogulesi, who is the special advisor to the president. So we have him here. Good evening, sir. So please, let's do appreciate him as he comes up.
Good afternoon. This feels like a pulpit. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here to be a part of this event and to speak to you on policy formulation and advocacy. The topic I have here, that I would like to cover is how to influence policy making as young professionals and pharmacists. So I believe that the audience I'm speaking to is all mostly young people who have an interest in policy, in public policy, governance, policy making, and I guess have questions and ideas about how to shape or influence policy. So I'm told I have about 40 minutes to do this. So I will just go through a couple of key points. But I think the first thing that I want to say actually is that I think people often underestimate the importance of or the significance of government or the public sector way that the lives that we live, the country that we live in the way that it's shaped, government is extremely powerful. Decisions are made. I mean, I think people speak quite dismissively often of civil servants. You hear a lot of people talk dismissively about civil servants. But those civil servants that often get spoken dismissively about, they hold the power to a lot of the actions and decisions that are taken that shape the lives that we live. And the private sector, may have money, may have, where you look at our banks and just, for example, and how much they declare as profit after tax, and all the, OSI branding and all that. Just think about it, the biggest banks, the biggest entities in Nigeria. And government has the power by one policy, by one decision, to just completely change a landscape. I don't know how many people remember how many banks we had before 2005. There were about 84. And the government came and decided that, okay, and of course, at that time, I think the capitalization for the banks was about 2 billion. That was the baseline, or how much you were expected to have as a bank. And so you had 84 banks, of varying sizes, mostly medium-sized, struggling banks. And then somebody came and said, okay, we're going to go from 2 billion to 25 billion minimum capital base. And that singular decision, a policy by a government, essentially a pronouncement by a central bank governor, completely altered the landscape. Completely. And for me, I think that's just a sense of how the power of government. And so you went from 84 banks, and of course, from 2 billion to 25 billion is a lot. So, of course, the only way to do that was to, mergers, acquisitions. I mean, some chose to go it alone and succeeded. But the landscape was completely changed. So what it just meant was that, where you had 84 banks, each of them with a board, chairman, MD, ED, all of a sudden, after the consolidation, I think they ended up with 25, which meant that, that's 60 or so EDs and boards gone, And so that's just the power of government and the policies and, the actions that government is able to take. And these things can be in form of policy, it can be in form of legislation, but the CBN one, the consolidation didn't even need legislation, because legislation that existed already empowered the CBN to announce capital base. So by just somebody just came and said, okay, 25 billion, and that was it. Many banks did not make it. So and I keep talking about how much the landscape changed. I don't know how many people have read Ikoji Imokwede's book, Living the Tarmac, his new book about Access Bank, about the Access Bank story. He talks quite a bit about in it about how Access Bank was one of the tiny banks that was on the way down, but somehow they took advantage of that policy. That same policy that wiped out other banks was the beginning of the ascent of Access Bank. And Access Bank was, was a low-level, poorly performing bank. They saw it. So what other people saw as a threat, they saw it as an opportunity. And Access Bank ended up going, today Access Bank is top 5. Anyhow you want to, in fact, in some respects, I think Access Bank is actually number 1 or number 2 by some measures. So, so this is just for me to give you a sense of, what government policy making can be. So I want to, in speaking about how to influence policy making as young professionals, young pharmacists, I think for me, the most important thing actually is knowledge. And what do I mean by knowledge? It's an understanding of how government works. And I find that many people are often not interested in this, and I find it quite counterproductive, because whether you like it or not, whether you understand how government works or not, government will have an impact on your life, whether you choose to understand it or not. You can make it easier by choosing to understand, by choosing to know. Now, it's not a magic bullet. Just understanding how government works does not mean that you have any influence, but you have to understand first how it works. It is what allows you to put your energy into the right channels. It's what allows you to know where you need to intervene. It's what allows you to know who you need to be speaking with. I get asked all the time, oh, what is the federal government doing about primary schools in Nigeria? And I often have to explain to people that, the first thing to know is that if you want to talk about basic education in Nigeria, you have to talk to state governments and local governments. So if you were if you thought that if you had a vision for a reform that has to do with primary schools in Nigeria, and you came to the Federal Ministry of Education, you are to a large extent wasting your time and your energy. Because you would have to understand first that, even the Constitution spells out, exclusive, I'm sure, I don't know how familiar we are with that, exclusive and concurrent legislative list, what belongs to what level. The only intervention that the federal government has in terms of primary and secondary education is support, financial support with UBEC, an agency called UBEC, which makes funding available to state governments. But in terms of spending money to build schools, build classrooms, hire teachers, it is states and local governments that have that power. Of course, the only exception is that the federal government has unity schools, 104 unity schools, which it controls directly. But outside of the unity schools, anything to do with basic education is. So it's that knowledge that allows you to know exactly who you should be talking to. When you know how the system works, when you know how a bill, for example, works in the National Assembly, all the various stages, the first reading, public hearing, committee stage, all those things. They are not exciting stuff, I'll be honest with you. If you don't work in the system, it's not exciting. But if you want to influence policy, then you must, of necessity, you must learn it, you must understand it. So okay, so an example actually from just last week, we heard about the PIB that was passed by the National Assembly, the House and the Senate. Now anybody who's paying attention would know that they passed different versions of the bill. There were some changes. One had 5% in one for the host communities bill fund. Another had, I think, 3%. Now, so what's going to happen obviously is that they're going to have to come together and harmonize. So committees will sit down and harmonize. Now, anybody who understands how government works, how policy making or legislative policy or process works, probably knows that this is the last opportunity to influence that harmonization behind the scenes before it gets sent to the president for assent. The moment it is signed by the president, the only way to change that bill is to go and start all over again. So in this harmonization, I imagine that there will be a lot of lobby, because they have to, the House and the Senate have to come together and on a single version of the bill, But of course, there have been many other points before now where people have intervened. They've had public hearings, they've had, people have submitted memoranda, all sorts of things. But it's important, it is super important to understand that this is how government works. This is how budgets are made. Another example, a few weeks ago, there was the noise about when the National Assembly leaked, or I don't know, we saw those videos of the National Assembly leaking. And then people went to town and said, but is this not the same National Assembly for which 20-something billion was spent to fix? But one of the first things you have to learn about the way government works is that, you can hear numbers long before any kobo has come out. So at the time that they were, you heard what the news about 27 billion for National Assembly renovation. It was a budget proposal. It wasn't even with the National Assembly. It was with the FCDA, Federal Capital Development Authority. Now, until now, as we speak, not a kobo of that money has actually been released. And that's because the way government procurement systems work, you know, there are many stages, many phases. So it's one thing to say this is our budget. It's another thing for there to be an approval, you know. So it's one thing to say this is our budget. It's another thing for you to get to the place where then you then put out a bid, for example, for contractors to submit bids to do the work. Then there are, you know, there's the Bureau of Public Procurement, BPP, that, you know, and if it's for a government contract, if it's for a, what is called a concession or public-private partnership, there's the ICRC, Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission. So there are all of these, you know, there are all of these nuances to these things that just mean that, you know, if you don't, you can save yourself a lot of unnecessary anger and energy dispensing by just understanding how the system works and knowing who to hold accountable for what. And so, you know, when a lot of people were saying, oh, National Assembly, you spent 27 billion, you know, in any case, you know, if there was any public anger, it should have gone even not to the National Assembly on that matter, but to the FCDA, who are in charge of that renovation. Number two is that they have not even started the renovation. They have not, no money has been released. So it helps not even just for as young people who want to be policymakers or to influence policy, even as citizens. It helps when you know what is what, who is in charge of what. It helps when you know, I don't know how many people are aware of the agency called FCCPC, the Federal Consumer Protection and Competition Commission, which is fairly new. It's a fairly new agency. It used to be called the Consumer Protection Council, CPC. There was an amendment of the Act in 2019. Now, this agency it's a consumer protection agency, which means that they take complaints from the public. Now, they have an app that's on iOS and Android stores where you can make complaints about services, whether it's government or private sector. And it works. And I'm here to challenge you that, look, we have to test our systems. If a government agency comes and says, we have this app, you know, where you can complain on, test it. Don't just let cynicism say, oh, they've come again. Test it. See if it works or not. The only way that our systems can get better is by testing these systems. I know that the FCCPC app and the complaint system, there's also a website. I know that it works. When your flight gets cancelled, you know, and you complain bitterly and all that, go a step further and send an email to that airline. Copy the FCCPC, copy NCAA, and wait and see what happens. The problem is that if you complain, if you just complain, that's it. Go a step further. And look, I can tell you that these mechanisms exist in a lot of public sector. You know, people think that government can be completely dismissive and all that, but there are systems and mechanisms that are in place. But you have to be aware that they exist, and you have the willingness. You have to have the willingness, you know, to test them. So when you get poor service, that's what I said. A few weeks ago I had some actually bad experiences with flights, and I'm a government official, but I did that. I complained by email. Document it, you know, because ultimately I think it's in this collective efforts that we push, because government has to be pushed. And it goes back to what we are saying about policy. Policy can be influenced. Don't get, I mean, a defeatist attitude that you can't make any impact is the worst possible way of starting starting out. I've seen it again and again. Policy can be influenced, government can be moved, especially in this day and age of social media. A few days ago, there was a video that went viral of somebody in Edo State complaining about the drainage that was being done, and he was using his hand to take it apart. Do you know what happened afterwards? Has anybody followed up with that? Did you see the governor's statement? The deputy governor of Edo State went to the site. The governor issued a statement. They are canceling the contract. They are going to award it again, and they are going to find, the person responsible and make sure that, the person is brought to book. Just by, and look, this guy who did the video, I could see the passion and the anger and the passion. He did it. He did the video, and you could tell that this was, and I remember in the video, he said that, look, he has worked on other similar projects. It's never been this bad. Now, that is one citizen who did a video, who decided to do a video, and, because again, look, things are also changing. In the age of social media, government officials are also more concerned about, image and perception and how, and behavior. So what has happened now is that with what the Edo State governor has done, now anybody who is going to build a road or anything in Edo State will think twice. I'm not saying people will still not cut corners. It's almost impossible to stop people attempting to cut corners. Anybody would think twice before attempting the same low quality kind of work. And so for me, that is just evidence of the power that you can have as a citizen, as somebody with a voice, somebody who knows, the guy who did that video in Edo, you could tell he obviously knew what he was saying. He knew what he was doing, and he showed it, with, he more or less took us on a tour. Like, look at this, how can it end here? How can it, with a simple, you could tell that there was some knowledge. This was not just somebody just flippantly, they've come again. He gave the details. There's no way any government official would have seen that video and not wanted to take action. So policy can be, but it starts with knowledge. It starts with knowing. It starts with knowing, so self-education. So knowledge of, I have here a list, stakeholders. I've spoken about that, who are the people who are in charge? Who are the people whose responsibility it is? Knowledge of processes. And the fact that there's a handbook that says this is how something is done does not actually mean that is how it is done. So understanding these things does not mean that, maybe the public procurement process says this is how the things should be done. What I've seen in government is that there's often a gap between theory and reality. So the manual may say this, A to B to C to D. But then in actual fact, when you get into the system, you find out that it's A to C, then maybe they come back to B and then D, or they skip B completely. So understanding the system means going beyond the textbook or the theory, and knowing that, look, this is exactly how these things are done. And often also there's a lot that is not codified in a manual or a system. That's the way many, especially in public sector. A knowledge of intended outcomes. What is the outcome you want to get out of a particular policy, influencing a particular policy? What is the outcome? Is it a legislation? If it's a change of legislation, that can be quite a long journey. If you want to change one word in the Constitution today, you need to have the change approved by a minimum of 24 state houses of assembly. If you want to change one word in the Constitution today, you have to have the National Assembly, both chambers, and then a minimum of 2/3 of 36 state houses of assembly to change one word in the National Assembly. To change one word in the Constitution. if it's not in the constitution, if it's just a law, an act, then you don't need the state houses of assembly. It's just the two chambers of National Assembly. So people talk a lot about the Land Use Act. You know, one of the reasons why it has been hard to change is that it is in the constitution. Unlike many other bills, you know, I mean, the Police Act, for example, was revised. There's a new Police Act now from last year, after for almost 70 years. The Police Act dates back to 1943. It was finally amended last year, you know. But you know, that was done in the National Assembly. You don't need, because it's not in the Constitution. But the Land Use Act has been embedded into the Constitution. So to change it, it means that you have to lobby, you know, and I use lobby in the actual normal sense of it, you know, which is to attempt to influence, to influence policy. You know, you have to do it at 24, a minimum of 24 state houses of assembly. In knowledge of historical context, where are we coming from with this policy? You know, PIB, for example, you know, how many people know that PIB has been since 2008, they've been attempts to pass the PIB. In 2018, the National Assembly at the time split it into 4 and then passed one of the 4 parts. But the president turned it down. It didn't assent to it and it was sent back. So this is actually the first time ever that the entire PIB has been passed by both houses of the both chambers of National Assembly. So, but it's important to know where we are coming from. You know, where is this law coming from? What, you know, what has changed? Because again, it helps you build a fuller picture of the journey you are about to set out on. The pitfalls. What are the pitfalls? Again, with public policy, there's often, look, it doesn't matter how perfect you think a policy, you know, it doesn't matter how flawed an existing policy is or how perfect your proposed policy is, there will always be obstacles and pitfalls somewhere. It doesn't matter how perfect you think it is. So you may think that we had today at the State House, we had the Minister of Aviation coming to do a briefing where he talked about them, and they asked, one of the questions journalists asked was about concessioning of the airports, and he was talking about, you know, just how, I mean, it's hard to argue against the concessioning of the airports. Like, government does not have the capacity to manage these things, facilities. Get it into the hands of private sector people who will manage it and maintain it. But you know, you have to factor in something called labor. You have to factor them into the equation. That people will be concerned about job losses, you know, and all that. That, okay, so all the people that work in the, so 4 airports are up for concession in the 4 big ones, Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Kano. All the people working there, what's going to happen to them? And that, look, it may seem like you may have 10 things, 9 are in alignment. It's that one that you don't have can delay the process for 10 years. I've seen it happen again and again. It happens quite easily. It can be a petition from somebody, you know, it can, a petition to National Assembly, then they summon you, come and explain. You're going to spend the next 4 or 5 months explaining. It can be anything can halt the process. So the minister was explaining what they are now trying to do to assure the unions that of the, I think 7,000 staff that FAN, Airports Authority, has nationwide, that only 1,000 of them, about 1,000 plus, work in the airports. So in other words, when we're talking about job loss, it's not job loss for, or it's not affecting 7,000 people who work in FAN. Now, it will affect only 1,000 plus who work in airports. Now, we're not concessioning all the terminals nationwide, the 20-something terminals. It's just 4. Only about 800 work in those terminals. But even that is not enough. Look, labor can tell you that, okay, until we get a plan for every single one of these people, you can't go ahead with this. So the minister then had to explain again that, look, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that when we hand over to the concessionaires, anybody who is qualified and you know, will be taken on by the concessionaires. Again, we have other airports that we are taking over, that FAN is taking over elsewhere in the country. We are going to assign all of the people, anybody who has to leave their place of work because of the concessioning will be hired somewhere else. But that's the kind of bending over backwards that has to be done in public policy. Those are the kind of costs that you have to estimate in advance. Because everything looks easy until it's time to get it done. I don't think it's this difficult in private sector establishments. Where, I mean, look at the whole principle of federal character in the public service, where you have to think about, if you want to hire people, you've got to think about that ethnic balance. It doesn't happen if you are working in GT Bank, if you are the MD of GT Bank, you can hire, 1,000 people, and I mean, you're only looking at their CV for what they've done. You don't have to meet a lot of other. It's not the same in public sector. All of those negotiations with labor unions and all that, in fact, many private sector organizations have succeeded in completely keeping labor out of their systems. So it's important, the pitfalls, the obstacles. And when you have historical context, you can tell why something failed before in the past. Look at the NNPC refineries, for example. Port Harcourt and Warri, I think, were actually concessioned in 2007 to Blue Star Consortium, which was owned by Aliko Dangote and Femi Otedola. That was one of the last things that former President Obasanjo did. But then when the new government came in, it was one of the first decisions that they also reversed. 14 years later, where we were still back at square one. So, it's very important. Public sector can be quite humbling in terms of how many things you have to take into account. That whole idea of stakeholders, any small thing. So we often laugh at, government, they always like setting up committees. But if you don't set up the committee, you cannot get anything done. If we want to move this here, from here to there, I could just leave this, yeah? In public sector, you have to set up a committee. Because the committee will then look at it and understand, why was it here in the first place? Because for all you know, you might then find out that this is the best place for the audience to see the person speaking here. Maybe because of a pillar here, a pillar there, this is the best spot. And then it is now in the committee that somebody who works in a particular ministry that installed this thing will now tell you that, okay, this is why it was here. Otherwise, you just come, you put it back, you put it there, and then 2 hours later, you now see what the problem is, you have to come back. So it's just the way government is built, and it's the same all over the world. Government work, that committee, because you have to have input. There's no legislation that is passed that touches only one or two government agencies. It touches multiple, because, don't forget that when you do legislation, when you are changing legislation, you are taking power from somebody to give to somebody else. You are taking money from somebody to give to somebody else. You are taking, so there are all those dimensions to it. There's nothing that just happens. You are moving this from here to there. This is a loss here of sorts. So you have to factor all that in. So usually what happens is when a bill gets sent to the president for assent, he actually first circulates it to all the agencies that might be impacted by that bill. So you tell us, so until you have some level of consensus from everybody, it's often difficult to move ahead. That's why things take so long in public sector. Things that people will do easily elsewhere, quickly, speedily. I mean, that's not to say that there's not space to move faster. Obviously, there is. There's a lot of room for improvement, for more efficiency. But even in the ideal system or in the ideal state, you will still need to have some form of consensus, some form of buy-in. Stakeholders have to be involved. And then, of course, I think the final point on knowledge is also about, what government agendas tend to be. Each government comes in and they have a focus because it's impossible to focus on everything at the same time. So the Buhari administration says security, economy, and anti-corruption. Yar'Adua had a 7-point agenda. The Jonathan administration had this transformation agenda. Lagos State has what they call the themes agenda, where themes is THEMES, each one standing for something. So you have to understand what each government, each administration is focused on, and how you can align the policy you want to influence or you want change with that. So there's some government. So in understanding that, you know what to waste, what not to waste your time on. Because a government's agenda also determines how much time it is devoting, how much money it is devoting to anything. So you've got to keep that in mind. So it's again all under the umbrella of knowledge. I spoke about social media earlier, and how easy it is to sort of advocate and push and publicize. But I have to be honest with you, the actual work is done offline. The actual work is done offline. Social media is excellent for publicity, for advocacy, for attention, but the actual work is done offline. And I will give the example of Occupy Nigeria 2012, January 2012, which was about corruption in the oil industry. Subsidy payments were too much, and all that. And for the better part of 2 weeks, Ganifawa Imi Park in Ojota, there was a lot of activism and anger and all that. And what were the demands? Okay, well, one, that fuel prices must come down. But the larger demand was about transparency in the oil and gas sector. That was the larger demand. Now, guess what? The easiest thing to achieve in Occupy was to get petroleum from 145 or to back to 86 or something. That was the easiest thing. That was done almost immediately. But guess how long it took to achieve, for example, getting NNPC to publish its audited results. The first time NNPC published audited results in the 40 plus years of its existence was 2018. Occupy was when? 2012. So when you understand how the system works, then you know that, look, there are certain quick wins. You can get the price of petrol down. That one doesn't take anything. It's done. But the actual larger work that you want to do, PIB, which is supposed to be another step towards cleaning up the oil industry, how many years has it taken? This is almost a decade after Occupy. Where did PIB happen? It won't happen in Ojota at the park. It's going to happen in the National Assembly. So it's about, and look, this, what I've just said now, you can apply it to the NSAS protest as well. That the best thing the NSAS movement could have achieved was the disbandment of SARS and maybe the setting up of the judicial panels. The larger work of police reform was never going to happen at the Lekki Toll Gate or out on the streets. It's going to happen by people sitting down with the Police Service Commission, with the police force itself, with the National Human Rights Commission, and all those bodies sitting down, and there's nothing spectacular or exciting these meetings because it is a lot of hard work. It's not, it's not banners, it's not sound bites, it's none of that stuff. So, but if you don't understand that, those dimensions to this thing, then you might end up spending too much time on one aspect while leaving another one out. The work of police reform that we want is still not done yet. And it will still take time because you need to change laws, you need to change policies, you need to, things. Look at all the talk about state police, for example. It now seems like it's finally going to happen. But how is it going to happen? It's going to happen in the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly, not anywhere else. So it's just that understanding that, look, there are short-term wins. There's what you can use your advocacy to do in the immediate. Black Lives Matter protests in the US, you get a lot of mileage, a lot of, people, if people can get fired and all that, but the longer term work is still on. Not even the US can claim that they have achieved the long-term goals of the Black Lives Matter movement. So but if you don't understand that, and you don't know how long the journey ahead of you is, then you cannot, how do you even prepare for a journey that you do not know how long it is? PIB has taken how many years now to pass? The FOI Act also took more than a decade to pass. Painstaking work, often unspectacular, unsexy work, but it needed to be done. And it's not by sound bites. So, as I close, and then of course, I think this must not go unsaid as well, that in influencing public policy, you also need to keep your eyes open for what I call third-party support, which is sort of like financing, funding. There's a lot of, the civil society space in Nigeria is huge. There are a lot of foundations and non-profits and that put money into causes, so you don't have to do it alone. But again, it goes back to knowledge. You need to be aware of the landscape. Who is funding what? Who is doing what? There's no point coming to do something. There's no point coming to start something that people have already gone 15 miles into. It's a waste of time. So again, it's knowledge. There are, as I said, the civil society organizations that have, that have areas that they focus on. And you must find ways to align, but you have to know who is funding what, who is supporting what, who is doing what. Without that knowledge. So ultimately, if you take just one thing out of what I'm saying today, it is that you need knowledge. You need to educate yourself. You need to equip yourself with an understanding of how government works, how systems work, how laws are made, how the budget is made. And of course, these things you are understanding are also changing by the day. It's never started. I know that a few years ago, as at 2015, if you know how they put together the budget, they submitted, agencies, ministries, departments will submit hard copies of the budget documents. That's how it worked. So you go to the budget office with your budget proposal in hard copy. And then a copy, and then a version of it on a disk or flash drive or something. And then the budget office will then collate all the soft copies together into a single document. And just think about the potential for making mistakes in that kind of system. About 2000, so when that budget padding issue happened in 2016, one of the things that the budget office did, and the head of the budget office used to be commissioner for finance, for budgets and planning in Lagos State, Ben Akabweze. One of the things they did was a simple thing that, okay, look, we're setting up a budget portal so that all MDAs will just input their budget proposals into the portal from where they are, without having to do, imagine how many flash drives do you want to collect in different formats and all that. So I know that in that particular aspect of the budgeting process changed. And then they made it such that it also has version control. So you can tell who is imputing what and who's amending what. So that if somebody changes something, you can tell that, okay, this person changed it, So things are also changing. The procurement process today is not what it was 10 years ago. So you have to keep up to date. You have to understand, things are constantly changing. And to be honest, sometimes it can be quite complicated. I've worked in government now for more than 5 years, and I can't tell you that I understand, a lot about a lot. But you have to start somewhere. Educate yourself. And at the end of the day, it boils down to your passion. If you're not passionate about it, then there's no point. If you're passionate about public policy, if you're passionate about governance, then I think that passion will be enough to get you to understand how these things work. And I've seen, for example, how, government contracts, they tell you this thing will be done by 20, we are awarding it in 2013, it's going to be finished by 2015. It almost never happens. Almost never happens. I've seen that again and again. Almost never happens. Now, when you're on the outside, what you just think of is these guys are hopeless. They don't know what they're doing. But then on the inside, when you see the inefficiencies and all that face to face, then you understand. Now, by understanding, I'm not saying you justify it, but you then understand. And you don't understand that with this system, it is almost impossible for things not to happen the way that they're happening. So, how to influence policy making? Get yourself educated. Understand. Ask questions. Ask questions. Visit government websites. And I find, again, because of my work, I found that there's actually a lot more information out there than we sometimes care to. Government websites, I know, are not often places where we go because we just assume that there will be nothing there. But because of my work, I often have to look for government documents online. And I find that there can be an incredible amount of information out there. I find that there's a lot, NIMET issues weather forecasts, accurate weather forecasts on a daily basis. A lot of people don't know. They issue seasonal climate predictions. That if you're a farmer, in fact, it was one of the things we saw today at the briefing by the Minister of Aviation. If you're a farmer, you can tell, accurate predictions of climate for 2021. It's there on the NIMET website, a downloadable document. So let me just encourage us, go visit government websites, look for the policy documents, look for the papers, look for the speeches. There's a lot of insight. And I'm telling you that because I do it myself. Look for the insights, look for the connections, look for the, the data, the statistics. And I think slowly you begin to piece together an understanding of how government works and how it doesn't work. Thank you. I'm not sure what's the follow now. Okay, so we'll just do maybe about 15 minutes of Q&A. If you have any question, please just, we'll take it one by one. Or you know what? Let me start here and then just move this way. So if there's anybody here. Yes. Speak out loud.
Thank you really so much. I think I've learned a lot from your wealth of experience and what you have to, the lecture you just delivered. I think it's a masterclass. Thank you so much. What I would like to question and encouragement to is that, with the situation of the political landscape, most times you need like a big break in order to actually get in. Having passion for adjusting public policy or adding your bit to public policy is one thing, and having a break to actually be somewhere you can make the impact is another. I'll give an example of myself. It took till I was on a team with the Commissioner of Health in Anambra State for me to actually understand the processes that's what was delaying setting up a DRF in a state. It's easy. I was outside and I was like, they don't know what they are doing. But actually, setting a DRF up is a legislative matter for the State House of Assembly, and it involves a lot of stakeholders coming together for those funds to be released. So I understand really the point you were trying to make. I want to encourage you, please, just like we have you up there, we need big breaks. I don't know if it's only me. I know there will be others that are more passionate to be involved and, make their own little impact, no matter where they find themselves. And then having that little opportunity to maybe sit on the committee, or maybe be an aide or something, will open your eyes to the millions of possibilities to make an impact. So thank you so much. That's just what I have to say.
Take one more here and then move.
My name is Pharmacist Ishaku Daniel, a delegate from Lagos. Thank you so much, sir, for exposing us to some things we never knew till now. So my question is, what are the factors that are being put in place to shorten this no-do gap of policies that are being formulated in the National Assembly? Are there factors, are there things that are put in place to shorten this gap in the no-do gap after formulation of these policies? Are they, since you have enlightened us that it takes so long for policies to be implemented, so I want to know, having known this, what are the things being done in the National Assembly to shorten this gap? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. This has been really enlightening. But my question is, as policy changes and all, how can we really influence these changes, seeing that we're not policy makers yet, we're not in decision-making rooms and all of that? And you've talked about the things that we need to know. But sometimes it feels like we really can't do much because we want to do this, we're talking about this, we're talking about it on social media, what we think should and should be done, should not be done. So how do you think we can really make changes in our environment, maybe in the small places that we have, even if we don't really, like my colleague said, talked about a big break, even if we don't really have that yet, how can we really affect this change as young people? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pharmacist Oluwapi. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is actually kind of related to questions that have been asked, but then I like to make my question more practical in the sense that, so you mentioned how you need to get two-thirds number of state houses of assemblies and all to get a word changed in the constitution. So my question now is, for the average citizen, the average person, myself, for instance, how can I get to lobby that number of people to ensure that something is actually done? Because as much as possible, we try to say, oh, some things need to be changed in the constitution, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. Okay, now this is the practical step. You've mentioned that we need to do this. How does the average citizen get to be able to do such? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the explosive session. My name is Pharmacist Joseph Olorunso, National Secretary of PSN-YPG. My question is a bit related to this. I'm aware of the legislative process of the US. They have lobbying companies that lobby. When someone has a bill to pass, they contract it out to lobbying companies. So I want to ask, what is the future of that in Nigeria? How can that work? How can, it is someone that sets up the lobbying company, how can that influence and reduce the bureaucratic bottlenecks that we experience when we're trying to create a new bill or amend an old one? Thank you, sir.
I'm Patrick Angelina. My question is under insecurity. The policies that you guys tend to make, you said that it takes longer time before it's being effected, but before you implement it. But the problem right now, we are facing a lot of insecurity around the whole stuff. So before you implement some stuff under the security aspect of it, does that mean that some citizens who should be dying? Can some of those policies, can you guys shorten the processes and try to like see insecurity as a major thing, or you address this as an like an emergency for some cases?
Okay. I want to thank you for this session. Is a mind opening, not just eye opening session. When you're speaking, you talked about different approaches to changes in policies. You mentioned Occupy Nigeria, which the present president of the country was also a bigger part of. You also made mention of the guy in Edo State that had to go on social media just for his voice to be heard. And you also mentioned about FCCP, right? Ideally, that guy is supposed to go through FCCP. Ideally, the guy in Edo was supposed to go through FCCP. Yeah, because he has to go through there are some agencies that such complaints should go through. But he had to bypass that because as we all know how this country ends up. So I don't know, between the two processes involved, you as a person, which do you think works faster? And also, if you consider the changes being made in the current administration when it comes to social media policies, don't you think that it also has a negative impact as to how our own voices, especially those with lack of resources, to be heard?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. My name is Pharmacist Abdullah Ahmad from Northwest, in Northwest Zone Coordinator. I know you have said a lot about understanding policy, how it is formulated, and also how you can make an advocacy on it. And during the course of your presentation, you made mention of the theory aspect and also the practical aspect. So mine is, what advice can you give us as young professionals to actually know how these policies are made in a practical settings? Because we need to know how these things work, how the processes work actually in practical aspect. Because it's when you understand, then you can make advocacy for those that don't understand. So that's my question.
Thank you for those questions. So, some of them are quite similar. But the first question was essentially a question about opportunity. How does one find opportunity? But, you cannot, to be honest, in all honesty, wait for opportunity to find you. You have to find opportunity. Now, so the best answer to that question is that, networking is key. Networking is key. You cannot just sit down. Now, one of the things that, state houses of assembly and national assembly often do public hearings on matters. They do that quite often. If the starting point for me, especially if you feel like you're an outsider, is to attend some of these things. They're open to the public. The starting point for me is to attend some of these things. Because, when you attend, not only do you get to, just how many people have ever been in a house of assembly before? Like you have been in a house of assembly. How many people? See, I see less than 10 hands. But, a public hearing is an opportunity to enter a house of assembly. There's something about just being there in those chambers, seeing how things are done, and it helps you to shape your expectations to man, it helps you, and then the networking that even can happen there. And look, it may not. I'm not saying push yourself into the hand, into the face or the hand of anybody and all that. You may need to go again and again. But these are opportunities. That's when you begin to identify the people that matter, the people that are the people that are important in a particular issue. So let's assume that you are, the issue of sexual and domestic violence is something that you are passionate about. And you go to a public hearing on maybe the establishment or on something, on a new law, say in Lagos State, about sexual and domestic violence. I can tell you that in that place that day are going to be all the people who matter in the field of sexual and gender violence in Lagos State. It's a starting point. You listen to them, you understand them, you know what I mean. You may not even meet any of them that day. It may be a month or two or a year later that you meet them somewhere and there's a connection point. Because one of the things I find with young people, I often young people want mentors. So I want, can you mentor me? But, it doesn't always work that way. You have to have stuff in common, because what I find is that when people ask to be mentored, you are putting a burden on the potential mentor that the mentor may not be equipped to deal with. So you have to make it easy for you to be mentored. And how do you make it easy? It is by, there's a way in which, so going back to what I said about, look, attending these events, there are people that, you will see by the time you meet somebody the third time in a similar setting, there are connections already been made that will never be made if you just walked up to the person, somewhere and just trying to do a pitch. So it's about understanding those nuances, that networking thing. Look, there are think tanks all over the place. And again, it goes back to knowledge. Are you aware in the field in which you are interested in, what are the think tanks and CSOs operating in that field? Have you ever sort of like, I used to be involved with something called CPP in Lagos, Center for Public Policy Alternatives, founded by a man who is now the DG of NISA. NISA is the Nigerian Institute for Social and Economic Research. So he's DG now, but he had this CPPA, where I've gone to speak a few times. There are so many of these think tanks, doing interesting stuff in policy. There are opportunities for you to, it may be to volunteer. It may be to attend an event that they've put together. In Abuja, there's Next Year. I don't know how many people know Next Year. Next Year is a think tank that does a lot of stuff in public policy. In fact, just 2 weeks ago at the Yar'Adua Center, they had a big event on for people moving from private sector to the public sector. And you had all of this, a fantastic panel. It happens, it was a public event. So Next Year, you guys can Google it, Next Year, NEXTIER. So there's so many like that, but you have to be aware. Get on their mailing list, attend their events. You will meet people, you will listen to, you will get a sense of what people are thinking about, what people are talking about. You get a sense of the opportunities, the gaps. And to be honest, that is the starting point for anybody that wants to get into public policy. It's by getting yourself into a climate that is already attuned to policy making. So I think that answers the how of the opportunity. You have to go in search of that opportunity. And it's not by trying to force yourself on people, but it's about getting into the space. When you get into the space, the people in the space will eventually recognize you. Shortening policy implementation times. Well, to be honest, I think the question was about how can, we shorten with National Assembly, shorten policy implementation. I mean, that's the whole point of, I guess, all the reforms that happen from time to time that happen. So, for example, one example is how many people have heard of Executive Order 7, which is the infrastructure tax credit scheme. Now, the biggest challenge with building bridges and highways and roads is that this particular bridge is worth 50 billion, but you will never have 50 billion in a single year's budget to do it. So you will now put 5 billion in this year's budget. Next year, put 5 billion. Next year, how long do you think it's going to take to finish that bridge? 10 years. That is what happens often. A person that is building a bridge cannot be waiting for it. It doesn't work that way. But unfortunately, the budget cycle is an annual cycle. Then you go back next year because you cannot get 50 billion at once. So Executive Order 7 basically came up with a policy that said that, okay, fine, we have some big companies that have money. Now we will allow you to use your money to do this particular project, and we will pay you back, but not in cash. We'll pay you back via tax credits. So taxes that you should pay over the next 10 years, we'll be deducting this money, from the taxes. So Apapa Osho, the expressway in Lagos, the value of it is about 72 billion. Dangote Group is the one building it. They should be done by this year or next year. They started in late 2018 or early 2019. Now, 72 billion, there's no way that thing will not take 10 years via the budget. It's not possible. But Aliko Dangote has 72 billion and he can do it. And he has done it. It's almost completed. Now, He's going to get paid. So, but Aliko also will owe government taxes over the next 10 years. So government is basically saying, okay, Aliko, we'll be knocking off this money off the taxes that you owe us over the next 10 years. A win-win for everybody. Aliko gets to not pay taxes. I mean, of course, there's also a margin in between the money that, like almost like a profit, for the company, but of course, it doesn't mean that anybody can just go and fix. It doesn't mean you can go and fix the road leading to your house and then you say you want to. Government must first approve the project, of course. Government is the one that will cost it. Otherwise, I will say that I did the pavement by my hand and it's 1 billion. So government will approve it. There's a whole guide, framework for it. They will cost it, they will approve it, they will give you the sign off. That's also what is happening with the Boni Bodo Bridge in River State, which is the first bridge that is going to link Bonny Island to the mainland. The cost is 200 billion. And NLNG, which is based in Bonny, is splitting the cost equally with the government. So NLNG is going to also put 100 billion down to finish it. They're almost done as well. They started in this thing was first awarded, according to the Minister of Works, in 1978. It was first awarded and it has been awarded. This final one was the 4th award and successful award. It has been awarded 3 times before this, 1978 and 2 more times. But guess what? There's no money. So you hear about the award. Second Niger Bridge was first flagged off by Obasanjo in 2007. Then Jonathan flagged it off in 2014. But you cannot do these things with the budget. So I give this example to just show some of the thinking that goes into, okay, look, this system is not working. How do we make it work? Executive Order 7 is a perfect example of that. You can allow people to build filling stations. You allow Chicken Republic, Mr. Biggs, to set up. You allow people to build filling stations. You do billboards, advertising. So the concessionaire has access to that. He doesn't own the road, but he has been given access to manage it for maybe 10 years or 20 years and to earn revenues from commercializing the assets. In exchange, and then of course, what he has to his obligation to government is to make sure that you fix it. You operate an ambulance service, a towing vehicle service. At the end of the day, it's a win-win because there are people who have the capacity and the money to do this thing. Government owns it, doesn't have the money. Why not come together? So these models, I say these models because these are new models. They didn't exist before. They've come now, and as each new one comes, people get inspired to think about more. The future of lobbying. I mean, there's private sector guys already lobby, and lobbying associations like the YPG is a potential lobby organization in its own right. It is. So lobbying already exists, maybe not in the same to the same extent as you find in the US and places, but lobbying, any association, any organization can lobby. The chief of staff to the deputy Senate president is a pharmacist, Otive Igbuzo. He's the one in charge of the constitution review that is ongoing. Otive Igbuzo is a pharmacist. but he spent a long time in like CSO, public sector. So those are people that you need to know. Those are people you need to engage with, people you need to ask for a meeting with. You know, there are pharmacists who are in government. You know, I don't think I think there's a deputy governor. There's probably one deputy governor. There are a bunch of senators, you know, who are pharmacists. Like, again, going back to knowledge, you have to know stakeholders. Who are our people? Who are our allies? Where are they? So, so anybody can lobby. Any organization can lobby, but you need to know who are your allies, who are your stakeholders. But of course, I imagine that the future of lobbying is also quite bright. You know, you'll find a more sustained focus on lobbying, because lobbying is essentially, you know, in a democracy, essentially what you want to do is to influence people to change decisions. In a dictatorship, you don't need to influence anybody. You know, it's done. In a democracy, you have to negotiate, you have to lobby. The question about security, well, I mean, so there are policies that have an impact on security, obviously. But there's also the immediate aspect of security, which is law enforcement. That one is not policy now. If police is going to, or the army is going to, you know, they're fighting in the northeast, the army is in the northwest, all that stuff. That one is not policy in that sense. It's immediate. But then there is long-term policy making, because a big part of the insecurity picture in Nigeria, of course, as we know, is unemployment, poverty. So you have to, in tackling insecurity, you are doing the immediate one, which is law enforcement, but you also have to have an eye on the future, on the long term, which is what are the kind of policies that will help us reduce our poverty and our two do not necessarily have to mean that because you are doing a policy for 20 years, you cannot do one for next week. Do you understand? So it's not an either or, all of them at the same time. And that's what governance often is. It's about 6-month plan, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 year, 50-year plans, all at the same time. And again, I think that's the same answer for the question about whether social media, the guy who complained on social media or should have gone to maybe FCCPC or something. Again, it's not an either or. Let's get that either or mentality out of our heads. It's important to just do, like, you can do both. You can complain when your flight is delayed. You will get annoyed there and then, yeah? But you will still do an email to complain. There's nothing that says you can't do both. And then finally, well, so the last one was about, you know, how, again, I think it's about how policies are made. It's about influence and all that. I think I've touched on a lot of those things. Managing your expectations, I think that's my final point, is very important. It's important to manage expectations. You know, the sense of disappointment that comes when something is going to take 5 years and you didn't know that it would take 5 years, you assumed it would be done in 1 week. The sense of disappointment that comes from that can completely, you know, destabilize you. Imagine going to the bank, you want to get a BTA because you are traveling and you think, oh, it's a 30-minute thing. And they tell you, our guy is 2 weeks. You know how you feel. But imagine if you knew in advance that this thing is 2 weeks. The energy levels are not the same at all. So to save your energy, for your mental health, that's why I say knowledge is important. Know how long things take. Get a sense of how long it will take so that you don't plunge into it. And because that a sense of disappointment and cynicism can do a lot more to damage us as young people than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for all you've said to us today. We'll be moving into our second section. This first session, as I said, was handled by Mr. Tolu Ogulesi, who is the special advisor to President Buhari on digital and new media. And I know we all asked questions on several aspects of policy making and all. So thank you very much once again, sir. So moving on to the second session, we'll be having pharmacist Tosi Adeyemi, who'll be taking us on a brief talk and a simulation event on policy making. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's an exciting time. I've really had fun listening to Pharmacist Tolu Ogunlesi. Thank you so much for that session. I think I would like to start with a few questions for Pharmacist Tolu anyway. I think one of the things I would like to ask is perhaps suggest a book that you think would be remarkably important for the audience in this room to read that might help them with one of the books you think has been most important to you in understanding how to influence policy locally here in Nigeria.
So Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's first book. I mean, so she has two. In fact, any of her two books actually. The first one is about corruption. I forget the name now. It's dangerous. No, I think that's the second one. There was a, but anyway, she got two books, which I mean, excellent insight as a minister of finance at the highest levels. Look for her two books. I think that's a good starting point. Also, the book, the Goje Imokwede's book, Living the Tarmac, that I mentioned, is not a public sector book, but but it talks about the impact of public sector decision making on the private sector. So that's those books. I think look out for those ones, and that's a good starting point.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to quickly do an exercise, which is just supposed to help you practicalize some of the things that we've heard this afternoon. And if you have received a copy of the workbook with you, I want you to think about, just where you're sitting, think about what one policy you think, if you had the opportunity to work on, or to one policy you think you will be interested in following up with an intervention on. Can I get a copy? Okay. So please think about it. One policy that you think you will be interested. All right. So the steps you find in this workbook, it's not necessary that you have to work through number 1 to number 2 to number 3 and through like that. But it's just important that you flesh out what is in the workbook for your own use. So first and foremost, let me give you an example. You see, some of the policies that might be a lot more easier to work with as pharmacists are some of those policies that are used by the ministries, departments, and agencies that you directly interface with as pharmacists. Take, for example, somebody mentioned, I think it was Cassinator, mentioned about the drug revolving fund. Okay, right. With the drug revolving fund, for example, one of the things that has always baffled me is that we have very few examples of successful drug revolving funds. And some of the reasons that have been adduced from literature include, what are some of the reasons that you've seen talked about on how our drug revolving funds get depleted? No, they actually funded well at the beginning. Misappropriation, mismanagement. Yeah, I mean, we can put down that mismanagement as well. But then there's also something we don't usually think about, recapitalization. right? Sometimes those policies, do we usually check to be sure that when inflation and other economic challenges erode their capacity to replace the medicines that they've sold at very cheap, non-commercial rates, to be sure that we can actually replace those medicines that have been sold? That's also a challenge that we do not usually pay attention to. It's actually one of the challenges that the more successful DRFs are currently facing. For example, the DRF in Yaba, right? Which is probably one of, the one in Nohio, National Orthopedic Hospital, right? It's actually one of the biggest challenges that they face, right? So we need to keep some of those things in mind, right? Okay, so let's just give you an example of a policy that it's, sometimes directly in front of you that you can work around, that doesn't really require extensive networks to work around. Another thing is a policy that was mentioned here this morning, the National Drug Policy, right? Somebody said that the last edition of review was when? 2005. Do you know why the last edition was 2005? Because nobody considers it a priority. Nobody has considered it a priority. That's why. Because there's no reason. Our essential drug policy, right? The list under the drug policy itself was reviewed in 2017. But the policy itself is much older and is already past the 5-year term when it should be reviewed, right? But the policy itself has not been reviewed. You get. So sometimes one of the things you need is to without my slides. Okay, so first and foremost, so how many of us have been able to think of some policies that would be interested in working around? You need to write it down. Just maybe one or two people. Let's just take a poll around the room. How many have identified a policy or something of interest to you that you'd like to work around? Okay.
Drug distribution. Yes.
Interest. Okay, so counterfeit medicines. Okay, that's another example. Counterfeit medicines, drug distribution. What area are you looking at in terms of drug distribution?
Okay, drug distribution, like from.
Should we narrow it down to say the NDDG?
Yes.
National Drug Distribution Guidelines. Yes. So what do you want to look at with the National Drug Distribution Guideline?
Okay, let me go to my goal. My goal is that all medicines on the essential medicine list are available in all community pharmacies. Okay. So that anyone can just step into a community pharmacy and get the medicine without having to, and then they are under the exclusive control of those that are licensed to handle these medicines, which happen to be pharmacists. So that in a way that we don't see someone that just has an SSC handling an antibiotic. That's an aberration. So that shouldn't work out. That shouldn't be allowed.
Okay. We have counterfeit medicines. We're talking of also drug distribution. Who else wants to chip in their example? Yes, please go ahead.
Mine is anti-cancer drugs included in the National Health Insurance Scheme.
in the National Health Insurance Scheme.
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware if there's anything currently addressing that small specific therapy in the NHIS currently?
Currently, what they did was to focus it on the most prevalent, which is breast cancer.
Okay.
Just breast cancer.
Okay, so within the NHIS, are medicines for breast cancer free?
No, they are subsidized.
They're subsidized.
Yes.
But it's only the medicines for breast cancer that's subsidized
Yes.
under the NHIS.
Yes.
Okay, so you want it to be expanded
Yes, to include childhood too.
to
Include childhood cancer.
include childhood cancers.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so but we seem to be almost everything is around medicines. Any other different example in the room? Sorry? Federal character. Where? The policy of federal character. Pharmacist Tolu, the policy of federal character, is that not an item for the Constitution? You understand? I think maybe you bite small bits first, and then you bite bigger pieces, and then you now bite national issues. Constitutional issues, then you graduate to that later. But like something that something that you will want to work on immediately after this conference. Yes, please.
Like, we see vehicles that release some very dangerous carbon monoxide gases that you can't even breathe. You see smokers exposing you as a secondary smoker. So that kind of policy to regulate such and help
regulate such events. Another thing I should also mention is also when you're suggesting those policies, also think about the practicality. That's how it's going to be administered in public. So how would you, for example, okay, I think you're onto something, but let's go gradually. So the next point is, after identifying this policy direction, is to identify your stakeholders. Take, for example, when on the policy on drug distribution, who would be the beneficiaries? The patients. Okay. So patients will be the primary beneficiaries. Any other beneficiaries? So okay. 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 But in most of these actions that you've described, the government is actually implementing. Spend, implement. They spend less, that's implementation, right? I mean, it's a secondary benefit to them. And it's also important. I remember one of the things in, Pharmacist Tolu was talking about is in communicating your advocacy objectives to stakeholders, being sure that you're speaking the language they understand. So this will also come in crafting your communication materials to stakeholders. So for example, you can tell them that they will need to spend less, right? Especially for a government that is getting cash strapped and not able to fund all of its needs. They're interested in where they can cut costs, as long as they're sure that you can prove it that they will cut costs with it. Is that right? So that's something that I think might be feasible. So beneficiaries will be patient in this case. In the case of counterfeit medicines, who are beneficiaries? I mean, as we're working through this, I want you to take your own worksheets and try and understand. Yes. Sorry? Yes. Better outcomes for treatment. Okay, so they can be beneficiaries in that case. And manufacturers are also beneficiaries in this case. Good. So who would be implementers in this case? Who would be implementers, for example, in a scheme to stem counterfeit medicines? NAFDAC, okay? So essentially government agencies, regulators, right? Okay. And then who are influencers? I'm going to come back to you now. Who can we identify as influencers here? Pharmaceutical manufacturing group. Yes. YPG. Remember the role Pharmacist Solu mentioned about YPG being influencers as well. PSN. Yes. Which other group again? ACP. But you're still within the same circle. Who else will be interested? What about funders of programs who are already challenged with infiltration of counterfeit medicines into their supply chain? What about those? Global Fund for Malaria and TB, won't that be an interesting thing for them? And then because they wield a lot of influence within the pharmaceutical sector, especially medicines being distributed locally, right? There are big time influencers since they're also big time spenders with government, right? So that's just to help you see where you put in those who are direct beneficiaries, those who are implementers, and this concerns them, especially concerns how credible their work appears to the general public. We talk a lot about how the general public is losing trust in government facilities, health facilities, right? So that means health authorities within state governments who are implementers of health policies within the states are implementers here, right? And they're important. So you also need to look at the influencers, of course, the NGOs, the CBOs, the faith-based organizations, all of that under influencers. Something else we should think about. You see, as much as we're thinking about NAFDAC, we're thinking about PCN and all of that, and health ministries under implementers. Remember this one, we also have a sort of cadre within the health ministry that is attending to a large segment of patients, community health extension workers, right? And then of course, we also need to think about where some groups like the patent medicine vendors also come in along this track. You know, sometimes I think when we don our pharmaceutical fatigue and we look down our nose and look at them and these ones, they are the riffraffs. I tell you, what you end up doing is you build gilded gates for your pharmacies, but those patients who go to the PPMVs will still get access to counterfeit medicines, and the health indices will still be poor because you've allowed a lot of leakage into the places where it should not get to ab initio, right? So we need to bring them into this kind of discourses and ensure that they also get, I'll get to that, some sort of training and work in this. Okay, now, after identifying your stakeholders here, you go to the power map. And the idea behind the power map is very simple, right? Now, when you place your all of these, your stakeholders along the power map, the idea is to find out from least influential to most influential for your policy, not who is in most influential within the health system, but for this policy that you're interested in, that you want to intervene in, you map them along those two axes and plot where they stand. Let's take, for example, the case of counterfeit medicines. On the case of counterfeit medicines, where would NAFDAC stand on this scale? Opposition? I think for the case of counterfeit medicines, you want to propose or you want to do an intervention around a policy for counterfeit medicines, right? You want to help ensure that counterfeit medicines no longer get into the supply chain. Where will NAFDAC stand in each of these boxes? High power. Why do you think so? Yes, and they have an enabling law that makes them act within that space, right? On this, where would you place PPMVLs? High power, low interest. No, sorry. High interest, low power. Where would you place PSN on this? PSN. High interest, low power. I kind of disagree. I mean, where I would place NAFDAC somewhere here, I would probably place PSN still within high power and high interest, but lower than NAFDAC. Why would I place PSN as high power within that phase? Number one, most of the pharmaceutical importers and access to these medicines go through members that are directly committed to PSN. So while they do not have any law with which they can mandate things to happen, their influence enables them to create impact within the sector, right? Do you understand? And then the members control a large number of these medicines that are being imported. Do you understand? Where would you place, for example, the police? Why do you think the police has high power? They're part of the arrangement for enforcement under NAFDAC, right? Where would you place the ballet of my local government? You see, they are part of your stakeholders. They're part of your stakeholders. You understand? In some cases, when you're looking at this, you also need to factor in gatekeepers for your community. In fact, for a lot of policies, if you do not factor in your gatekeepers, you will build beautiful nonsense that will just come crashing down like a pack of cards, right? So you also need to look for those stakeholders who are gatekeepers within your community and also address their interests along the line. Some of them, the way you address their interests is by educating them and, of course, by building their competence along the line of what you need them to do, okay? So in that way, we've been able to identify stakeholders. I'm asking you to do the same, exactly what we're talking about here. I want you to take 1 minute to look at your own policy idea and map some of your stakeholders on the map. Can you quickly take a minute to do that? The policy idea you're thinking about, can you quickly map a few stakeholders? This is just a test work, right? When you get home, you'll get a soft copy of this, graciously provided, and you will be able to work with this freely for any idea that you have. But the idea is just, let's ensure that when you do these things, you write them down, you're able to remember it afterwards. Is anybody willing to talk about some of the stakeholders they've mapped? Anybody? Anybody wants to talk about the stakeholders they've mapped? Nobody? Okay. It's either I'm confusing everybody or we are understanding properly. Which of it? Neither of the above. Oh, okay, you're still working on it. Okay, so let's just take 30 seconds more to fill that in, and then we'll quickly. One thing I find very interesting was happened by Pharmacist Tolu earlier on is desk research. It's research that you can do just sitting where you are with your phone, right? Just try and Google to understand if there are even any policies that are currently in place for the thing you want to intervene on, so that you can understand why the challenges exist, right? What this can do for you, for example, once you identify there's a dedicated policy for your given topic, you're able to find out what other policies or strategies address the topic of interest to you, what the stated objectives of the policies are, if they're currently meeting those objectives or not, and why they are meeting them or not meeting those objectives. And then if there's a specified means of implementation for that policy, you'll also be able to identify that. And then find out if there are any new developments along those lines. Is the policy being reviewed? Is this something you can make input on? For example, maybe there is a public hearing concerning that policy at the time, or a technical work group has been convened by the ministry, by the department, or by the agency, and they are already taking inputs from the public. So you can submit a memorandum to them about the policy of interest to you. That's also very interesting, right? During your desk research, one of the things you should also do is find out what the policy says exactly, right? I put up cuts of the National Drug Policy, and because there's a National Adolescent and Youth Health Policy 2017. Very interestingly, that National Adolescent and Youth Health Policy actually makes a certain provision that's very interesting. It allows for adolescents and youth to have access to to have access to healthcare, to access to family planning, regardless of age, religion, tribe, regardless of marital status, and all of that. But you know something? Across all of the 36 states of the Federation, that statement is modified by the age of consent. Do you understand? So even though it's a beautiful policy, well worded, because there is a standing issue within the Constitution around the age of consent, which is also repeated in the, I mean, that age of consent is still repeated in one other health policy. I don't remember the name now. I'm going to get it later, right? So what it essentially does is below the age of 16, except in a state, for example, like Kano and Kaduna states, where in Kano, the state legislature has actually approved for 14 years. And then in a state like Lagos State, where it is still standing on 18 years, you know, they cannot have access to those medicines. So it's important to actually know what your policy says, right? And how the implementation is being modified by other existing policies. So have we finished mapping? Have we finished mapping? Does anyone quickly want to share how, can you quickly share with us how you mapped your stakeholders?
Okay. For those on the opposition side, high power and high influence, the non-pharmacists in drug distribution cycle, that's those, and I'm talking of drug distribution guideline policy. That's those that operate, the operators of the open markets. They're going to be on the opposition side, high power, high influence. And also we have those, the PPMVs operators, and those that manufacture counterfeit medicines, but they'll be on the low power, low interest side of the opposition. Then on the support, we have the government agencies such as NAFDAC, then we have pharmacists under PSN, then we have donors and NGOs, then law enforcement. So law enforcement will be on the low, high power, low interest side of the support. Then we also have the community leaders and religious leaders. That is the king, market women leader, youth leaders, and religious leaders too. Excellent. But they'll be on the low power, low influence side of the support.
Now, there's something I want to state about this stakeholder mapping, especially the power mapping. As you go along, you need to consistently revise your power map, because as people become more aware of how these policies affect them, their attitudes, how these things are implemented changes. So some of them will begin to engage more. Some of them will remain disinterested. So those who begin to engage more, you begin to up them in either their interest or in their power, right? And then just so that you keep abreast of those who are really, really in your corner, right? And of course, if over maybe 6 months of engaging along a policy line, from 6 people who were really, really supporting your policy, drops to 4 people, drops to 2 people, and then at a point it's only you that is remaining in the WhatsApp group. You understand that it's either something is wrong with your communication, or really, really you've not been able to build priority for that policy. You understand? So it's not a static thing. It's something that needs to continue going on. Now, there's something called policy implementation assessment, which I would have loved to quickly talk about. We can quickly take, tomorrow. Okay. So we're going to take that tomorrow, but let me see if I can, let me be very sincere with you. I kind of bit more than I could chew with preparing for this. So what I would also promise you is, after this conference, I will try and record the whole slides. I think there are about 57 of them. I see the audacity, right? The audacity to come here with 57 slides. I actually didn't intend to show you all 57 slides, believe me. I just wanted to show you a couple of slides that were very important. Like this. Like this. There's a formal tool for assessing policy implementation, and it's a collaborative work between USAID and it's a collaborative work between USAID and one other team. I'm not sure I remember right now. It's if you go to healthpolicyinitiative.com/policy implementation, right, you'll be able to get access to the tool. It helps you assess implementers and beneficiaries, and then there's a database there where you can input all your results and then also analyze your results to understand where there's a mismatch between energies and outcomes. You understand? So it's very, very useful. It's also what was used. If you go to, there's a policy scorecard that's been used by PRB, the Population Reference Bureau. If you go to the website, scorecard.prb.org/. Okay, I'm going to send the link to you, right? But if you go to that point, you'll be able to see an example of how this policy implementation tool is applied in practice, right? What it does is it maps what the policy looks like. Okay, so it maps what policy says and them amongst axes. The way it looks at, for example, this Nigeria committed to plan consent, provider authorization, restrictions based on age, restrictions based on marital status, access to a full range of FP methods, comprehensive sexuality methods. Now, this is just one framework for looking at family planning. There is a framework for looking at essential medicines policy, which has been published by WHO/INROD. There's also another one for looking at, thank you, for looking at health insurance, right? There are different policies. So once you start looking at your policy and you're confused about which framework you need to use to analyze your policy, please reach out. My email is available. I can help point you in the right direction to ensure that you're guided by evidence. We don't want to propose policy because it suits our ego. We want to propose policy because there's evidence that if you make this kind of policy, right, we will skip over some of the challenges that we usually have. Or if you make policies in this way, key population are not excluded. Or if you make policies in this way, it ensures that you reduce corruption to a minimum, right? So it's important to be guided by policy, by evidence. Tomorrow, I will be able to run us through something called fundamentals of the policy process, creating a window of opportunity for policy change. That speaks essentially to the questions that were asked earlier on. What you need to pull together, how to ensure that you create enough attention for your policy, how to ensure that you're speaking to the right policymakers, how to build support within your policy community to ensure that you're able to make remarkable progress within your policy area. And then we'll finish this up. Is that okay? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for being a wonderful audience.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, thank you everyone for your time. Just before we go, one person has a question for Pharmacist Tolu Ogulesi. So we'll be taking that question quickly and we'll be rounding up.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel Obayomi. Okay, I've been hearing a lot of making policy changes. For someone like me that is also very passionate about making policy changes, but there's another factor as a young person is making ends meet. So for example, I want to paint it like working in an hospital, I cannot say I want to make a policy change on maybe tobacco use, and then the hospital also requires my service. So I cannot be taking excuses that, oh, today I'm with the minister or commissioner for health Lagos State. Tomorrow I have to meet with a ballet. Next tomorrow. So if for someone that is passionate in pursuing that part, is it that there are grants or there's something so that, because that would be like the discouragement. You are pursuing something, you're broke. Yeah, I'm painting in plain. So like for a young person, how can he balance that situation? Does he have to change a job? Does he have to look for a flexible job? Or if there's something that can be done? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know. There's no easy answer to that question, but it's a dilemma that is not only, you're not the only one who has to deal with that dilemma. I mean, the world is full of people who are artists and fashion designers, and who have a day job or who are passionate about something, whether it's coding or making clothes or whatever. Now, what often happens is that at the beginning you have to combine the two, but there comes a time in most people's lives where it then becomes clear that you can no longer combine the two. So Kunle Afolayan was a banker and a filmmaker until he couldn't be both a banker and a filmmaker. And it was clear to him that it's time to leave banking and become a full-time filmmaker. There will be a stage, but he didn't one day wake up and just leave banking and jump into filmmaking. For a while, he combined the two. So my answer is you are going to have to make ends meet. It's even more difficult if you have a family. I mean, if you're single, you can starve. You can, if you don't have, so you have to combine the two. And it's a sacrifice. There's a price to pay. But there will come a time when you have gone sufficiently far in one of the two that it becomes clear to you that I cannot combine this. I have to focus on one. And it may end up being that it's that hospital pharmacy that you will focus on and decide that maybe there's no opportunity yet for my policy at this point in my life. And it may end up being that, it's the other one that you choose. But at the beginning, I think you have to do both. And then just pay, you're going to lose out on opportunities to hang out with your friends, or to your annual leave might be spent working, but it's a dilemma that, most people are human beings face in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, last question for today. And this question is for Pharmacist Tose. Okay. Please, very brief.
Pharmacist Tosin, I want to very commendable presentation. I want to know if the things you want to advocate for or the topics you want to advocate for is anti-government policy, something like the Twitter ban by the federal government of Nigeria. I want to advocate that they should unban Twitter, or something like the self-determination stuff that they clamp down on Nnamdi Kanu. We want to allow more freedom for people to express themselves about how they really feel without being harassed and dragged into the country at night by hooligans. So how do you really design something like that, and go about? I want to have an idea.
Okay, let me start with a story. So a few weeks ago, it came to light that somebody within an international network that I consult for had collected money through another person's bank account to run projects that was abortion-based. Now, we know that the government has a specific law, right, against providing abortion services in Nigeria. We understand that the law may not be fair and the law needs to change, but currently that law has not changed, right? Now, the person collected the money and it happened that he chopulated the money, or the money got lost in transit, or or snakes ate the money or something, you see. But the truth could not be exhumed because what was being funded by the funder was illegal, and they could not seek redress because what they were funding was illegal, and they knew it was illegal. So that was why they were not funding them directly through the approved channels for the NGO, right? For things that are not legal, what you can do is advocate to the government and put pressure on the government through civil means to change their position, right? So number one, like I said, find out your stakeholders. Who do you think would be interested in what you're talking about? Of course, civil organizations. They're interested in expanding civil liberties because they know that with improved participation of everyone, there will be a fairer government that represents all. Yeah. Now, so those are some of your stakeholders that you're looking at. Some of the other people that you should also look at would be opposition governments that may, and this is the truth, because it's not everybody in opposition government that has a different mindset. It's not. So if you find somebody in an opposition government that also has a similar mindset with you, and also some people within the same government that have a similar mindset with you, and the only way you will do that is by speaking with those stakeholders. So speak to them. That's policy analysis tool, right? Contains within it a way to elicit what they think. For example, even within the Ministry of Health, I mean, we've done stakeholder interviews within the Ministry of Health, and there are people who are saying, I would like to see these regulations about abortion removed. But as it stands today, it has not been removed. So they cannot offer those services or release regulations about them because they are not, they're against the law that currently exists in Nigeria, right? So what you need to do is identify those stakeholders and then begin to, one, look at the political landscape, see where you need to make that change. If it is a law, it is a long process. If it is a ministry's policy, a policy domiciled within ministry, department, agency, it's easy to influence. Take, for instance, NAFDAC's recent policy about extending their supervision to wholesalers and distributors, right? That one is it's a department, it's an agency-based policy. What you need is speak within stakeholders within NAFDAC, within its board, and look for ways to provide evidence, not manufacture evidence. Sometimes if you see that what they are saying actually works for what it should work, I mean, the evidence should convince you. But if the evidence shows otherwise, then show them that evidence. But you need to speak in a language that they will be more akin to listen to. For example, earlier on, we were talking about counterfeit medicines and saying, drug distribution, and saying that with proper drug distribution, there'll be less infiltration of counterfeit medicines. The health ministry will have to spend less to get proper cure, since they will only spend once and that drug will work as it should. While telling a politician that spending less money can get better results, also when you tell them that if they spend this money, they are more likely to get re-elected, it will probably get you more, it will probably get you their ears better than telling them that they will spend less. It's the truth. But it's also the truth that you need to speak because it supports your policy objective. You understand? So, I mean, I wanted to give an example, and then I remember that it was a sensitive one. So you need to speak the language that, one, politicians will understand, which is one, about satisfying their their community, and number two, about re-election. Number two, when you speak to MDAs, especially their DGs and boards, talking to them about efficiency and how it will show that they are actively working or actively improving the space, and how this will, show their board as being very participatory and all of that. That also helps. When you're speaking to beneficiaries, also helping them understand that if they speak up for this cause, that these are the benefits, it also works. So getting all of those stakeholders to speak together, right, and make change is really, really the crux of what we're going to be looking at tomorrow. How you make the political landscape, the problems and the solutions, and bring them together to form a window of opportunity for policy change, right? Yeah. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible, but the idea is to ensure that you do it in a way that is civil and, of course, evidence-based. You understand? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to add, Pharmacist Obayomi, not all policy processes have to have you going physically to the ballets and all of that. You can start. There's something that Pharmacist Tolu does a lot of. It is that he curates information. He curates information and then he pushes it out and people engage with that information. You can do that. And you can do that while still maintaining your source of income. And then once you build, I think they call it thought leadership within that area, grants actually come looking for you. You understand? So in that, maybe somehow resign and then
All right, thank you very much, Safo. Thank you. Thank you once again to our speakers for today's event. And thank you to everyone who attended this workshop. This workshop continues tomorrow. Tomorrow would be fully hands-on, and we'll be splitting everyone that will be available into groups. We'll be giving you topics to work on. You'll be using the sheet that has been given to you today. And you pick a topic, you get to deliberate amongst yourself how you're going to go about, that policy advocacy for whatever topic you're given or you choose. So we'll meet tomorrow afternoon again. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. If you have any questions for our speakers, you can come with your questions then.
Add my voice on this bit.
All right, so we've come to the end of today's session. The opening ceremony, everything was a successful one. So let's quickly move out to the buses, back to our respective accommodation. We'll be converging again at exactly 8 p.m. for the cultural night event. So please, this is the venue for the event. This is the venue for the event. So please, let's come early, come colorful, come early.